Chapter 195. Big Brother, Old Seventh has suffered such a huge loss. Are we not going to get back at him? A burly man with a full beard said unwillingly. The beard on his face was trembling because of his anger. Get back at him? Do you know why no 7th grade battle saints have personally fought for the 5 stripes path understanding tree? Hui Feng glanced at his group of brothers and asked with a sneer. Confusion immediately appeared on their faces. This was also something they did not understand. It was just a small store, and the owner's cultivation level was only a 5th grade battle king. In their eyes, a mere battle king was no different from an ant. Could it be that a group of 7th grade battle saints were afraid of a 5th grade battle king? This was the biggest joke in the world. After arriving in the Imperial City, I personally sent people to gather information about this little store. This unremarkable little store that was opened in a small alleyway is far from being as simple as it seems on the surface. Hui Feng took in a deep breath and said, even though he wasn't sure how accurate the information was, it was better to believe it than to not believe it. According to the information, the store has a mechanical puppet that can fight against a 7th grade battle saint. Furthermore, there is a terrifying existence that is rumored to be a supreme beast lying in front of the door. However, the supreme beast part is probably just a rumor. Even if it is not a supreme beast, it is at least a 7th grade spirit beast. This is equivalent to having 2 7th grade battle saints guarding the store. Do you dare to trespass into such a small store? Hui Feng said solemnly. He tirelessly recounted the information about the store. Suddenly, everyone's eyes widened. The 7th master was even more shocked. Damn it, indeed, that mechanical puppet was not an ordinary lump of metal. It could actually fight against a 7th grade battle saint. What a freaking dog! So, Old 7th, you are already very lucky to be able to come back alive, Hui Feng said. Big brother, but Old 7th, I am not willing to just let it go like this, the 7th master said with his teeth clenched. Recalling the scene of him being stripped naked and the pain in his balls, he felt fresh blood rushing to his head and about to burst out. Hui Feng paced back and forth with his hands behind his back. He narrowed his eyes and said calmly, of course we have to get back at him, but we cannot be hasty. Let's find a suitable time. Oh my God! So scary, what kind of monster is this? Mother, there's a lion. A man-eating lion. Is this a spiritual lion? So burly. The huge fire lion slowly walked on the main road of the imperial capital. With every step it took, the bricks on the ground seemed to be scorched. The fire lion's eyes were incomparably sharp as it arrogantly swept its gaze over the lowly humans around it. The lion's roar caused many people to shiver and wet their pants. On the back of the fire lion, a man in red smiled and patted the fire lion's head, calming it down. Don't mess around. Don't scare people. The man's voice was very gentle. His eyes were filled with curiosity as he sized up the bustling imperial capital. He was in a very good mood. Suddenly, a burly figure slowly walked over from afar and appeared in front of him. The eyes of the man in red slightly constricted. He solemnly looked at the burly figure and slightly nodded his head. The aura of this burly man was extremely terrifying. It was obvious that he was a powerful 7th grade battle saint. Your spirit beast is very handsome. However, in the imperial capital, spirit beasts are not allowed to travel on the main road. I hope that you can cooperate. Xiao Meng solemnly looked at the man and beast before him, his heart trembling slightly. A 7th grade fire lion and a 7th grade battle saint. This combination was indeed frightening. I am Mu Lingfeng from the Wildlands. I've long heard of the imperial capital's great General Xiao Meng's strength and vigor. Now that I've seen you today, you truly live up to your reputation. The man in red, Mu Lingfeng, smiled and said. He leaped down from the back of the fire lion and gently patted the lion's head. In his hand, an array plate carved from a top-grade jade appeared. With a flash of light, The fire lion turned into a stream of light and entered the array plate. Xiao Ming's eyes narrowed again as he sucked in a breath of cold air. Coming from the wildlands and knowing the way of taming beasts, could he be someone from that terrifying force? Even the people from that place had come out of the mountains. How terrifying! Please, Your Excellency. I've already prepared a superior room for you, Xiao Ming said. Mu Lingfeng gave Xiao Ming a meaningful look. He did not refuse and slowly left with Xiao Ming. Miss, this jade hairpin is definitely good stuff. Just look at the quality of the material and its sparkling and translucent appearance. Selling it to you for 1 gold coin is definitely not expensive. On the side of the street, a peddler's eyes were rolling as he stared at the slightly dazed young girl in a warrior's robe. With his sharp eyes, he could immediately tell that this young girl was definitely a big fat sheep. That dazed look of hers made her very gullible. 1 gold coin. The young girl was dumbfounded. She sized up the jade hairpin suspiciously. The material of this jade hairpin was very ordinary. It was made of mixed jade. Could there be something special about it? Miss, this is just a small business. Don't judge this jade hairpin by its ordinary appearance. Its effects are very special. If you wear it, you'll calm your qi and focus your mind, which will make it easier for you to cultivate. One look and I can tell that you're a martial artist, right? This jade hairpin suits you even better. The peddler's eyes kept rolling as he explained. The young girl was a little confused. Looking at the jade hairpin, she realized that it really did have the effect of calming one's qi and focusing one's mind, as the peddler said. Could this jade hairpin be some kind of spiritual weapon? Thinking that she had found a treasure, the young girl happily fished out her purse to pay for it. Hey, little girl. It's been a few years and you're still as silly and adorable as ever. Just as the young lady took out a gold coin, a white and tender arm hooked around her neck. A breathtakingly beautiful face appeared beside her and said with a smile, "Come on, let's go. Sister and I Yen. What are you doing here?" The young girl exclaimed with joy when she saw the person next to her. And I Yen rubbed the girl's head and grabbed the jade hairpin from her hand. She curled the corner of her mouth and said to the peddler, "Can you repeat what you just said?" The peddler did not expect such an outrageously beautiful woman to suddenly appear. His eyes rolled and he was about to say something when he saw the woman's hand twist and the jade hairpin was melting at a speed visible to the naked eye. Mamma mia! The peddler almost peed in his pants. This woman was a monster. You dare to ask for a gold coin for this piece of trash that isn't even worth a copper coin? Aren't you afraid that I'll break all your teeth? And I Yen snorted coldly. The peddler felt bitter and did not even dare to breathe loudly. And I Yen looked at the peddler's cowardly expression and immediately felt bored. She pulled the young girl and left. Ye Xiling, why did your master dare to let you out alone? You're practically being sold and you're still counting money for him. And I Yen glanced at the young girl beside her who had already taken out a spiritual fruit and was munching on it. I'm not afraid. He can't beat me. Ye Xiling blinked her eyes and said with her mouth full, "That's true. Even though you're silly, your cultivation isn't weak." And I Yin muttered, "Let's go. I'll take you little glutton to eat something good." When Ye Xiling heard that there was something good to eat, her eyes immediately lit up and her face was filled with excitement. Master told me to come to the Imperial City in search of a destiny. Sister and I Yen, do you know where it is? Ye Xiling followed behind an I Yen and asked in confusion. Who knows? Who cares? Since it's a destiny, we'll find it when the time is right. And I Yen pursed her lips. The Supreme Elder also told her to come here to search for a destiny. Who the hell knew what that destiny was? 5 Stripes Path Understanding Tree? Maybe so. Outside the gates of the Imperial City, 3 figures arrived on horseback. Wu Yunbai looked at the majestic walls of the light-wind Imperial City, narrowed her eyes and nodded. Then, she dismounted and led the spirit horse into the Imperial City. After a month's journey, they finally arrived at the Imperial City from the White Cloud Villa. "Brat, I hope you still remember to save the Ice Soul Monarch Lotus Seed for me," Wu Yunbai murmured and smoothly entered the city. After sending off the beaming Wan Er and Ouyang Xiaoyi, who had helped him for the whole day, the opening hours for the day were over. Bufang stretched his back and closed the door. The 5 stripes path understanding tree in the earthy yellow flower pot was already more than a meter tall. Bufang could constantly feel a strange fluctuation emanating from it. According to Ouyang Xiaoyi's explanation, this fluctuation was the righteousness emitted by the path understanding tree, which could increase one's cultivation speed and the probability of enlightenment. Ouyang Xiaoyi would sit beside this small tree to cultivate during her breaks. Even though Bufang could feel this fluctuation, it did not help his cultivation in the slightest. This was because his cultivation did not rely on cultivation, but on business crystals. However, Bufang was still very clear about the value of the 5 stripes path understanding tree. He returned to the kitchen, scooped out a bowl of spirit energy spring water, and poured it into the flower pot. "The store's greenery is not lush enough. Eat more and grow more green," Bufang softly said while looking at the path understanding tree. Back in the kitchen, Bufang practiced his knife skills for a while, then leisurely walked to the cupboard. At this moment, he was a little excited, not because of anything else, but because today, he would be able to taste the spirit wine brewed with 3 types of 7th-grade spirit herbs. Opening the cupboard, in an instant, a vigorous ocean scent wafted towards him. This was the environment adjusted by the cupboard, and Bufang could almost feel the salty sea breeze. Waving his hand, Bufang let the scent dissipate a little, and his gaze fell on the huge wine jar that was quietly placed in the cupboard. The wine jar did not change at all from a month ago, but Bufang knew that the interior had already undergone great changes. Holding the wine jar, Bufang suddenly exerted force, but found that the wine jar had become much heavier, and for a moment, he actually could not move it. Raising his eyebrows, Bufang once again sank his energy into his dantian, and finally carried the wine jar out of the cupboard, and placed it on the kitchen floor. The mouth of the wine jar was sealed tightly with clay, airtight, and not the slightest smell of the wine seeped out. However, in Bufang's heart, the curiosity in his heart increased. Filled with excitement, Bufang's hand covered the clay seal, and with a little force, the clay seal was opened with a bang. Chapter 196. The clay seal was slapped open by Bufang with a bang sound. In an instant, a rich and mellow wine aroma surged out from within the wine jar. The wine aroma seemed to have materialized and was concealed by a hazy mist. It instantly surged into Bufang's nostrils and stirred his taste buds. This was an extremely mellow fruit wine aroma with a hint of sweetness. However, this sweetness did not affect the aroma of the wine at all. Instead, it made the wine aroma even more alluring and intoxicating. Bufang's eyes widened and he could not help but gulp down a mouthful of saliva. Then, he brought his nose closer and took a deep breath. The wine aroma was like a small snake scuttling into his nostrils. In an instant it swam through his limbs and bones. It was as if his entire being was excited. "How fragrant! Great wine!" Bufang exclaimed in admiration. However, the expression on his face did not change much. This was because the method he used to brew this wine was wine within wine, jar within jar. Therefore, this was not the final product. Even though the wine aroma at this moment was not bad, it was only on par with the Iceheart Jade Urn wine. There was still some distance to go before it could completely surpass the Iceheart Jade Urn wine and become even more mellow than the dragon's breath, described by Ni Yen. Bufang was not in a hurry. He took out 3 small wine jars and used a bamboo tube to scoop out the wine from the jars and pour them into the small wine jars. The bamboo tube was inserted into the wine jars. With a light scoop, the sound of the wine flowing could be heard. The wine aroma seemed to have settled for a long time and suddenly burst forth. An intoxicated look appeared on Bufang's face. The wine was not as clear as spring water. This time, the wine was a faint yellow. The yellow was pure and not artificial. It was not a turbid yellow caused by impurities, but a clear yellow. After dividing the wine from the wine jars into 3 small wine jars, the remaining wine jars were left in the large wine jars. Bufang took out a filter and once again filtered out half of the wine jars. After doing all this, Bufang's heart was once again on fire. He covered his palm with true qi and carefully reached into the wine jar. He grabbed one of the boiling hot wine jars, and his heart suddenly shivered. This should be the wine jar that was brewed using the phoenix bloodgrass. Bufang's heart was filled with excitement. Then, he suddenly exerted force in an attempt to remove the small wine jar. The surface of the small wine jar became very slippery. If not for the fact that his palm was covered with true qi, Bufang would not have been able to take the wine jar out so easily. When he took out the wine jar, Bufang was stunned. That was because the wine jar in his hand had completely changed. The surface of the wine jar had turned into a flame-like red. It was sparkling and translucent. Even the material of the jar had changed. Through the transparent surface, one could see the scene within the wine jar. The wine liquid within was a flame-like red, and a hazy gas lingered above the wine jar. Bufang was slightly surprised in his heart. He placed the small wine jar on the table. As the light shone on it, the red glow was dazzling and mesmerizing. Bufang clicked his tongue in wonder. He continued to cover his palm with true qi and reached inside. He grabbed a bone-chilling wine jar and took it out. The wine jar had turned into a light blue color, as if it was made of ice crystals. It emitted a hazy chill. Without a doubt, this was the wine jar used to brew the Ice Soul Monarch Lotus. After reaching inside for the 3rd time, Bufang took out the last wine jar. This was the wine jar used to brew the 3 stripes path understanding fruit. The surface of the wine jar did not change as obviously as the previous 2 wine jars. It was just that the 3 cloud patterns on the surface had become denser. It was as if real clouds were floating on top of the jar, dense and not dispersing. The 3 wine jars were placed on the table. Each of them had their own unique characteristic. Bufang dispersed the true qi in his hand. He squinted his eyes and sized up the 3 wine jars. The corners of his mouth twitched. Interesting. He picked up the fiery red wine jar. The clay seal on it was slightly bulging, as if it was about to break. Bufang let out a light breath and slapped open the clay seal. Bang! With a muffled sound, the clay seal directly soared into the sky. A loud and clear phoenix cry resounded from the wine jar. A fiery red phoenix shadow spread its wings and flew out. Flames overflowed in all directions. After spinning once in the air, it turned into a vigorous wine fragrance and exploded. Bufang sniffed the wine fragrance and immediately felt his whole body tremble. It was as if all the cells in his body were completely activated at this moment. His eyes lit up and the circulation of true qi in his body became much faster. A rich wine fragrance like raging flames. A burning sensation. Bufang muttered in his heart. Then, he cast his gaze on the wine jar. If he did not count the time acceleration in the cupboard, the wine fragrance within the wine jar should have been brewing for 3 years. Now that it had erupted, it was simply shocking. Just the fragrance of this wine jar alone was rich and mellow. It drifted out and lingered in the entire store. It even drifted out of the alleyway and lingered in the surroundings. Blackie, who had been lying on the ground, was also stimulated by the wine fragrance. It raised its dog head and blinked its doggy eyes. It looked toward Bufang's store. The wine within the wine jar had a fiery red color. The wine fragrance was like a burning flame. With a gentle shake, one could even faintly hear the cries of a fire phoenix. Bufang turned his gaze toward the wine jar that seemed to be made of ice crystals. He removed the clay seal, and the wine fragrance that had been brewing for 3 years erupted. It gathered above the wine jar and transformed into an ice-blue lotus flower that was slowly moving. The wine fragrance from this wine jar was not hot, but cold. With a sniff, Bufang felt as if his nose was about to be frozen. This caused him to slightly furrow his brows. He lightly tapped on the wine jar with his index finger. The ice-blue wine suddenly trembled and rippled unceasingly, ringing out with a tinkling sound. Bufang licked his lips and set his sights on the wine jug containing the 3 stripes path understanding fruit. He removed the seal and found that it was plain, without any strange phenomenon occurring. Bufang was taken aback. He moved closer to take a look. Suddenly, the first cloud pattern on the wine jar dispersed. It was as if his heart had suddenly skipped a beat. A rich wine fragrance surged out and almost knocked Bufang over. The wine fragrance was incomparably rich. It rushed out of the store and even out of the alleyway, causing many people around the alleyway to be intoxicated. With a sniff, their faces were flushed and they could not stop trembling in drunkenness. Bufang felt dizzy and was slightly swaying from the impact of the wine. The second cloud pattern dispersed and another wave of wine fragrance surged forth. The impact caused Bufang to take another step back. Like a soundless ripple, the wine fragrance once again spread out and almost enveloped the entire Immortal Phoenix restaurant. Yen, who was tasting the delicacies with Yi Xiling in the Immortal Phoenix restaurant, was suddenly taken aback. Her exquisite nose suddenly twitched and her eyes were as bright as the stars in the night sky. This wine fragrance, where is it coming from? Why is it so rich and fragrant? With a gulp, Yen immediately brought Yi Xiling out of the Immortal Phoenix restaurant. Her nose was constantly twitching as she traced the source of the wine fragrance. When the 3 wine fragrances of the 3 stripes path understanding fruit spread out, Bufang's store had already turned into a sea of wine fragrance. With just a whiff of the fragrance, Bufang's face would uncontrollably turn red, as if he had just drunk a cup of mellow wine. Bufang operated his true energy to suppress the drunkenness in his body. His eyes could not help but flash with astonishment. The wine made from these 3 ingredients using a special method actually had such an unusual effect. However, this was not the final product. Bufang picked up a jade jar with a solemn expression on his face. He first poured half of the yellow wine from the large jar into the jade jar. Then, he picked up the fiery red wine jar and poured half of it. Next, he picked up the icy blue wine jar and poured half of it. Finally, he picked up the 3 stripes path understanding fruit wine jar and poured half of it. He used the jade jar to mix the 3 wine liquids together. The jade jar immediately overflowed with brilliance and slightly trembled. Bufang's eyes lit up. He closed the jar's lid and filled his hands with true energy. With a pat of his hands, the wine jar immediately soared into the air. It spun and emitted a continuous buzzing sound. Dong! The jade jar was suddenly placed on the table with a dull thud. Fine beads of sweat overflowed from Bufang's forehead. His eyes were filled with a fiery passion. This wine had finally taken shape. Carefully opening the lid of the jade jar, no unusual phenomenon occurred. However, an incomparably mellow wine fragrance, which was much richer than the previous 4 wine fragrances, wafted out. This wine fragrance was vast and mighty, rolling and surging like a vast ocean. In an instant, Bufang's entire being was immersed in it. The wine fragrance swept out like the waves of the sea, surging and surging. With the store as the center, it spread out. Yen, who was holding Yi Xiling's hand, suddenly changed her expression. Then, her face flushed red and her whole body trembled uncontrollably. This wine fragrance changed again. It became even more unbelievable. The wine fragrance was like waves, sweeping out in all directions. With the store as the center, half of the imperial city was enveloped in it. Chapter 197. Half of the imperial city was enveloped by the fragrance of the wine. This was an extremely rich fragrance that caused people to be intoxicated. Like a wave, it surged out and silently spread out. Not far from the alleyway, and I Yen and Yi Xiling both took a deep breath. Their faces were flushed red. They looked at each other and saw the incredulity in each other's eyes. How can this wine be so fragrant? And I Yen murmured. Then, she sped up and sped toward the source of the wine aroma. In a luxurious inn in the imperial city. The 13 bandits of Majo were toasting each other in the inn. They exchanged toasts with one another, and the sound of laughter resounded endlessly as they drank the wine. The inn was bustling with activity. The aroma of food and wine permeated the air. Suddenly, an invisible wave surged forward. What followed was an indescribable aroma. Clang! A crisp sound rang out. The 13 bandits were stunned. They lost their grip on the wine jugs in their hands and fell to the ground. The wine spilled all over the floor. However, they acted as if they did not notice. They squinted their eyes and unconsciously twitched their noses. Saliva dripped from the corners of their mouth. Their faces were filled with intoxication. So fragrant. Is this the aroma of wine? It's so hard to control. Brothers, let's go drink. When the 13 great bandits regained their senses, they immediately burst into an uproar. The fragrance of the wine made them feel as though their souls were about to leave their bodies. As martial artists, they were naturally fond of wine. When the wine worm in their stomachs was lured out, they felt extremely uncomfortable. The 13 bandits loudly shouted and rushed out of the inn. They followed the direction of the wine aroma and marched in a grandiose manner. Xiao Mansion. Xiao Meng sat in his study. The light flickered and the cold wind blew outside the window. He put down the pen in his hand, frowned, and rubbed his eyes. An intoxicating aroma of wine drifted over. It was like the caress of a lover. Xiao Meng's body trembled and his eyes opened involuntarily. He was addicted to wine. Good wine. Such an aroma doesn't seem to exist in this world. Xiao Meng took a deep breath, wanting to capture all the wine fragrance in the air. He stood up, took the thick crane cloak hanging on the chair, put it on, and followed the direction of the wine fragrance. Xiao Yu was sitting cross-legged in his room. His entire body was surrounded by a white sword aura. The fierce sword aura surged and continuously gathered above his head. Sometimes it transformed into a small sword, and sometimes it transformed into a myriad of sword auras. Suddenly, the sword light dissipated with a piu sound. Xiao Yu opened his eyes and couldn't help but lick his dry lips. Wine. A wine more fragrant than the Ice Heart Jade Urn wine. My God! Xiao Yu's hoarse voice contained an indescribable shock. Smelling the fragrance of the wine, Xiao Yu did not even have the mood to train anymore. He directly leapt up, and with a pinch of his sword fingers, the door instantly opened wide. His entire body stepped on the sword light as he swiftly flew out. How could I, Xiao Yu, miss out on such fine wine? Ah! Ouyang Manor. A thunderous snoring sound reverberated in the room of the 3 barbarians of Ouyang. The 3 brothers slept in the same room. Every night it was like thunder. There was no longer a need for the servants to guard the room because the sound of snoring was enough to automatically guard against thieves. Suddenly, the snoring that was supposed to resound throughout the night came to an abrupt stop. Then, a series of smacking sounds could be heard. The eyes of the 3 barbarians of Ouyang were wide open, and their nostrils were wide open as they fiercely sniffed the wine fragrance in the air. They looked like dogs that had smelled meat. Bang, bang, bang! The 3 brothers got out of bed in unison, put on their clothes, sniffed their noses, and with saliva dripping from the corners of their mouths, they majestically ran out of the room and headed straight for the source of the wine fragrance. This was a sleepless night. Half of the imperial city was enveloped in the rich aroma of the wine. It was so tempting that all the wine lovers unconsciously followed the aroma. Bufang wiped away the beads of sweat on his forehead as the corners of his mouth twitched. As he looked at the wine in the jade jar, he immediately heaved a sigh of relief in his heart. The 4 types of wine were all filled with spiritual energy. It was not something that could be done simply by pouring them together and shaking them. Bufang needed to use his true energy to neutralize them so that each type of wine would be perfectly blended together. This was not a qualitative change caused by a quantitative change. Instead, it was a qualitative improvement. The fragrance emitted from the jade jar was extremely enchanting. Just by smelling the wine fragrance, Bufang felt a wave of intoxication. One could imagine how strong the wine was. Compared to the fragrance of the Ice Heart Jade Urn wine, there was no comparison at all. It was like the difference between the light of a firefly and the light of the moon. Of course, this was only the difference in the wine fragrance. The actual difference in the taste might not be that great. However, the spirit energy contained in the Ice Heart Jade Urn wine was much weaker than this newly brewed spirit wine. Bufang took out a green jade porcelain cup and poured himself a cup of wine. After mixing, the color of the wine had fused into a light green color. A faint mist lingered above the wine, which was incomparably faintly discernible. It was like the immortal wine of the heavenly palace. Lifting up the cup, Bufang looked at the small cup of wine and could not help but lick his lips, forcefully suppressing the impatience in his heart. Good wine needed to be savored slowly. An impatient person would not be able to eat hot tofu. This was a principle that Bufang understood. He gently took a small sip of the wine. The moment the wine entered his mouth, it was cool and refreshing. In an instant, it rushed into his mouth. After entering his throat, the wine suddenly exploded like a volcano eruption. A burning sensation engulfed his entire body. Bufang felt as if all the pores on his body had opened up and his eyes were wide open. When the wine entered his stomach, Bufang felt as if a vast ocean was surging toward him and drowning his entire body. The rich spirit energy in his stomach was like an explosion. After 3 consecutive explosions, Bufang could not help but let out a drunken burp. The refreshing feeling that engulfed his entire body caused Bufang to squint his eyes and slightly bare his teeth. So refreshing. Good wine. It went without saying that this was definitely a good wine. The Ice Heart Jade Urn wine could not compare to it. Whether it was the taste or the fragrance, it completely suppressed the Ice Heart Jade Urn wine. After taking another sip, the refreshing feeling of burning flames within the coldness made Bufang's nostrils feel as if they were about to blow out waves of air. The combination of ice and fire is so refreshing that it can fly. Bufang praised and took another sip. After 3 sips, he had just finished the wine in the green jade porcelain cup. Slightly shaking his head, Bufang felt a little tipsy. He had only drunk 1 cup of wine, but he was already on the verge of passing out. The strength of this new wine was simply terrifying. Forcefully channeling his true energy to clear his head, Bufang smacked his lips as he looked at the wine in the jade wine jar. His eyes were burning with passion. Bufang estimated that he could only brew 3 jars of this wine. If this wine was to be sold, it would definitely not be sold 1 jar at a time. After all, the strength of this wine was too strong. Bufang almost passed out after a single cup. He mixed the remaining wine and channeled his true energy to create 2 more jars of wine. Bufang poured the remaining wine into Xiao Bai's mouth. The metal lump Xiao Bai only rubbed its bald head. Its mechanical eyes flickered, but it did not have the slightest reaction. This is indeed Owner Bu's place. I was wondering who in the imperial city could brew such a rich wine aroma. Who else could it be other than Owner Bu? An Yen followed the fragrance of the wine and arrived at the entrance of the alleyway. When she saw the familiar alleyway, she suddenly had a look of realization. Then, a sweet smile appeared on her beautiful face. However, her smile quickly disappeared and was replaced by a frown. Owner Bu definitely wouldn't open his store at night. Doesn't that mean I won't be able to drink this wine? Just as Yen was hesitating, a series of footsteps could be heard coming from the empty street. Yen turned her head in astonishment and saw a group of people rushing toward the alleyway. Seeing that group of people, the corners of Yen's mouth twitched. This lineup was a little scary. The 13 bandits were at the front. As they ran, they fiercely sniffed the wine aroma in the air. Behind the 13 bandits were several elders. The aura of these elders was also surging. Among them, there were even 7th-grade battle saint. A man in red was sniffing as he stood with his hands behind his back. An elder with white hair and a white beard was also striding toward the store with a longsword on his back. The 3 barbarians of Ouyang and the 3 drunkards of Ouyang were taking heavy steps with drool dripping from the corners of their mouths. Behind them were General Ouyang Zongheng and the old man Ouyang Chi. Almost all of the Ouyang family's drunkards were present. A sword light flashed by and Xiao Yu arrived on his sword. Xiao Meng also arrived following the wine aroma. This was a terrifying group. When the group of people met on the street, they immediately stared at each other with strange expressions on their faces. Xiao Meng did not know whether to laugh or cry. As expected, it was Owner Bu's doing again. Aside from Fong Fong's little store, where else could this wine aroma appear? The expression of the 7th master fluctuated between green and red. Damn! Why is it here again? This was the place that left him with an unforgettable memory. Everyone looked at each other and nodded their heads to express their greetings. None of them said anything. They were actually a little embarrassed. After all, they were all people of status. It would be a lie to say that they were not embarrassed to come out in the middle of the night following the wine aroma and even run into each other. They continued forward and stepped into the alleyway. They saw the store with its tightly shut doors, and a rich wine aroma was continuously wafting from within. Everyone was astonished. It was said that a good wine's aroma could spread for 10 miles. However, the wine aroma of this store was simply enveloping a radius of several hundred miles. Such a wine aroma is really making this old man's heart itch. I will go ahead and have a taste. Everyone, please feel free. The white-haired and white-browed elder with a long sword on his back was the first to lose control. He smiled at the crowd and walked toward the store. The ancestor of the Void Sword Pavilion, Tian Shuzi. Xiao Yu's pupils constricted. This was a sword expert, a 7th-grade battle saint. However, his expression quickly became odd. Looking at Tian Shuzi's back, the corners of his mouth curled up. Chapter 198. Everyone in the Void Sword Pavilion knew that Tian Shuzi loved wine. Sword cultivators loved to walk with their swords, drink wine, and make merry. Their swords and wine seemed to be intertwined and became an inseparable thing. It seemed to be an unspoken rule that sword cultivators loved wine. Xiao Yu loved wine, so he was attracted by the aroma. Tian Shuzi loved wine even more, so he impatiently stepped forward. Xiao Yu playfully looked at Tian Shuzi. The aroma came from Owner Bu's store, yet Tian Shuzi actually dared to step forward. Did he really think that Owner Bu's reputation as the #1 unscrupulous store in the Imperial City was undeserved? No one dared to act rashly. They all stared strangely at Tian Shuzi's back as he gradually walked into the alleyway. Tian Shuzi stood with his hands behind his back and a long sword on his back. He was wearing a long robe that fluttered in the wind. Tian Shuzi unhurriedly arrived at the entrance of the store. What entered his eyes was the big black dog that was snoring loudly at the entrance. After pondering for a while, Tian Shuzi turned his gaze toward the tightly shut door. The store's entrance was tightly shut. It seemed like it was not open for business. Tian Shuzi raised his hand and knocked on the door. The sound of knocking echoed in the alleyway, causing everyone's hearts to tighten and their gazes to become even more serious. After knocking for a while, Tian Shuzi's expression became gloomy. He realized that there was not the slightest sound coming from within the store. This meant that the owner of the store could not be bothered with him, and did not even want to open the door. How preposterous! However, the other party might not know my name. Tian Shuzi's expression was gloomy as he thought to himself. He lightly coughed and spoke in an elderly voice. "Store owner, I am Tian Shuzi from the Void Sword Pavilion. I suddenly smelled the rich aroma of wine within the store, and came here today to ask for wine. Owner, please open the door for a chat. Tian Shuzi's voice was filled with vigor as it continuously echoed in the quiet alleyway. However, even after a long time, there was still no response. The store's door was still tightly shut and there was no sign of it opening. Tian Shuzi's patience finally ran out. His face was as dark as still water as he coldly said, "Are you not going to respond to my request for wine? Don't tell me that I, Tian Shuzi, am worth it for you to open your shop?" Tian Shuzi, the ancestor of the Void Sword Pavilion, was a powerhouse of his generation that swept through the Light Wind Empire when he was young. Even though he was old now, his might was still the same. Many legends about him were still circulating in the empire. Xiao Yu curled his lips. He felt that Tian Shuzi's words were quite funny. To be honest, your face really wasn't worth Owner Bu opening the door. How dare you? I've never received such treatment, and I've witnessed your arrogance today. Since it's like this, then don't blame me for trespassing. Tian Shuzi was enraged. The true energy in his dantian began to circulate on its own, causing his white hair and beard to flutter. Surging true qi circled around his body like small dragons, wrapping around his body. Bang! Tian Shuzi's eyes narrowed. His palm that was filled with true energy fiercely slammed into the store's door. A wave of energy rolled out and the surging true energy caused the expressions of many people present to slightly change. Tian Shuzi's cultivation level was indeed worthy of his reputation. However, after the crowd exclaimed in surprise, their expressions became even weirder. The straightforward and adorable Yi Xiling could not help but let out a chuckle. The atmosphere instantly became a little awkward. The surging waves of air that Tian Shuzi emitted slammed onto the door, but the door did not budge in the slightest. The door of the store was still tightly shut. Tian Shuzi's hair and beard were all fluttering. He widened his eyes and pressed his palm against the door. He did not know if he should put it down or not. What happened to trespassing? In the end, he could not even open the door. This was a blatant slap in the face. Furthermore, this slap in the face was caused by him. It was simply too embarrassing. Tian Shuzi retracted his palm and lightly coughed. He tapped the ground with the tip of his feet and his entire body floated up. He took a few steps back and put some distance between himself and the store. Forming a sword finger with one hand, the sword energy on Tian Shuzi's body spiraled in the air, ripping and rotating. This old man has already given you a chance. Since you did not cherish it, then this old man will really trespass, Tian Shuzi calmly said. The store's door was still tightly shut and not even a fart was let out. Tian Shuzi flew into a rage out of humiliation. He lightly snorted and slid his sword finger. The thousands of sword energy floating around his body swirled and rapidly charged toward the store's door. Blackie, who was lying on the ground, opened its mouth and yawned. It lazily looked at the dazzling sword energy charging toward the door before rolling its eyes and continuing to sleep. Smoke and dust rose into the air. A gust of wind blew past and the smoke and dust that filled the store's entrance gradually dissipated. Tian Shuzi's pupils trembled and his eyeballs nearly popped out of their sockets. The heck? Is this shabby store made out of a tortoise shell? You can't even break it like that? Even if you can't, you should at least leave a mark, right? Do you have to be so disrespectful? Tian Shuzi felt as if he had just been beaten by a dog. The power of his sword finger was already extraordinary. Even the gates of the imperial city would have been blasted open by it. However, the store's entrance was actually unable to shatter a few broken wooden planks. Haha! Old man Tian Shuzi, are you really that weak? You can't even shatter a door. The Tian Shuzi finger truly lives up to its name. It can't even budge a door after smashing it. It is indeed powerful. Elder sister and I Yen. Is this old man an idiot? Poochie. As Tian Shuzi listened to the discussions around him and the unbridled mockery of the crowd, he suddenly felt as if his heart was being pierced by an invisible arrow. Why, just as the crowd was mocking Tian Shuzi, the enraged Tian Shuzi was about to pull out the longsword on his back. However, just as he was preparing to unleash an attack with all his might, the store's door suddenly opened. Once the door was opened, an even more intense wine fragrance wafted out. This wine fragrance was like poison, causing the crowd to involuntarily become intoxicated. A figure, an unrestrained figure, was holding a blue and white porcelain cup and lightly leaning against the door as he stared at them with an intoxicated expression. Burp. Who exactly is knocking on my store's door in the middle of the night? Bu Fang's face was flushed red, but his expression was extremely solemn. This kind of incongruity caused the crowd to feel extremely strange. He was wearing a long robe and the front of his chest was open, seemingly due to the heat. The wine fragrance wafted out from within the store. Tian Shuzi's eyes were fixated on the blue and white porcelain cup in Bu Fang's hand. Good wine. This is definitely good wine. This is the best wine I've ever seen in my life, Tian Shuzi exclaimed. The blue and white porcelain cup in Bu Fang's hand was enshrouded in dense spirit energy. 3 cloud patterns floated above it, as if it was a brewing spirit wine bomb. This is naturally good wine, but you still haven't answered my question? Were you the one who knocked on my store's door in the middle of the night? Bu Fang leaned against the door and indifferently glanced at Tian Shuzi. That's me. This old man is here to request for wine. I hope that you can fulfill my wish, Tian Shuzi passionately said. Bu Fang raised his eyebrows. He raised the blue and white porcelain cup in his hand and gently swayed it in front of the crowd. Are you talking about this wine in this cup? Bu Fang lightly said. As Bu Fang swung the cup, the fragrance from the wine cup assailed their nostrils, causing their eyes to light up. Ai Yen, Xiao Yu, and the rest had extremely strange expressions as they looked at Bu Fang, whose face was flushed red and whose clothes were wide open. The corners of their mouths twitched. Was this still the owner Bu they knew? Even though his face was still expressionless, his actions were simply too dazzling. Was owner Bu drunk? That's right. Tian Shuzi swallowed a mouthful of saliva. The liquor bug in his stomach had long been seduced. Bu Fang looked at him and slightly curled the corners of his mouth. Then, under Tian Shuzi's dumbfounded gaze, he downed the cup of wine in one gulp. Tsk. Good wine. Bu Fang slightly bared his teeth as he praised. Tian Shuzi felt as if his heart was being pierced by a knife. This guy was definitely doing this on purpose. Today's opening hours have ended. We will not be selling any dishes, including good wine, Bu Fang said as he lightly exhaled. Tian Shuzi's expression darkened and became extremely cold. I told you to sell wine, so you sold it. Cut the crap. In the Void Sword Pavilion, or even in the entire Light Wind Empire, no one dared to speak to him in such a manner. Even if he were to snatch a cup of wine, no one would dare to say anything. The owner of the store before him was actually so arrogant. Taking a step forward, Tian Shuzi's body was surrounded by sword light. In an instant, he appeared in front of Bu Fang, bringing with him a fierce gust of wind. Those who dared to fool me have already turned into a pile of bones. Brat, are you courting death? Tian Shuzi's tone was incomparably domineering. At this moment, the might of the Void Sword Pavilion's old ancestor was completely displayed. Bu Fang calmly leaned against the door. With 2 fingers holding the blue and white porcelain cup, he let out another burp. The rich aroma of wine pervaded the air. Behind him, 2 red rays of light flickered and Xiao Bai's chubby figure appeared. Bu Fang looked at Tian Shuzi, who was right in front of him. Looking at the other party's dazzling white beard and long white hair, he wrinkled his nose. I already said that today's opening hours have ended and I won't be selling wine. Are you trying to cause trouble? Then you'll have to bear the consequences. Chapter 199. If you want to cause trouble, you'll have to bear the consequences. Bufang's voice was very calm. He leaned against the door frame, holding the blue and white porcelain cup between his fingers, and let out a light belch. His expressionless face was flushed with alcohol, and his eyes were slightly tipsy, which made him look very attractive. Tian Shuzi's face scrunched up into a frown as he inhaled the almost tangible burp. He took a few steps back and coldly stared at Bufang. With a sneer on his face, his white beard and white hair were slightly fluttering as a sharp sword energy floated behind him. So what if I want to cause trouble? If I don't get to drink this wine today, I'll tear down your store. Tian Shuzi pinched his fingers together, and the long sword on his back emitted a crisp cry. It actually directly soared into the sky, spun a few times, and floated above his head. The sword was incomparably resplendent. In the dark night, it was as dazzling as starlight. The secret technique of the Void Sword Pavilion, the sword manipulation technique. In the distance, the corner of Xiao Yu's mouth twitched as he watched Tian Shuzi display the sword manipulation technique. He did not know whether to laugh or cry. Judging from Tian Shuzi's appearance, it was obvious that he did not do any homework before coming to the Imperial City. It was obvious that he did not understand the trump card of Fong Fong's little store. Even Xiao Meng had suffered a great loss at this store before. Owner Bu was completely unafraid of a 7th-grade battle saint. And Ai Yen, on the other hand, was rather interested. Her beautiful eyes slightly widened and her long eyelashes blinked as she expectantly looked at the chubby Xiao Bai who was already walking out from behind Bufang. This puppet was very interesting. And Ai Yen had never seen a puppet that could resist a 7th-grade battle saint. She was going to feast her eyes on it today. Elder sister and Ai Yen, aren't we going to help? Tian Shuzi is a 7th-grade battle saint and the owner is only a 5th-grade battle king. Won't he be crushed to death? Yi Xiling asked with her eyes wide open. She puzzledly looked toward an Ai Yen, who was watching a good show. Don't worry, that old man won't die, an Ai Yen said as she patted Yi Xiling's head. Yi Xiling, sister and Ai Yen, you're talking to the wrong person. I'm saying that the boss might be in danger. A 7th-grade battle saint is still very powerful, Yi Xiling said seriously. And Ai Yen looked at the girl, who was serious and cute, and could not help but laugh. It's okay, that old man really won't die. Yi Xiling. Xiao Meng did not look worried either. He stood with his hands behind his back. He wanted to see how strong the patriarch of the Void Sword Pavilion was. He had been able to fight against Xiao Bai back then. If Tian Shuzi could do the same, then he would have to take him seriously. The 13 bandits of Mazhou smiled excitedly as they stared at Tian Shuzi and Bufang with meaningful smiles. The man in red, Mu Lingfeng, leaned against the wall of the alleyway. He stroked his slender fingers as he calmly watched the battle that was about to break out. Bufang smacked his lips and savored the intoxicating aroma of the wine. He straightened his body, adjusted the lapel in front of his chest, turned around and lightly patted Xiao Bai's stomach. He calmly said, "Troublemakers, just strip them and throw them out. Everyone, the store's opening hours for today have ended. If you would like to taste the wine, please come earlier tomorrow and line up. After opening hours, the store will not provide service." Bufang's figure gradually disappeared into the shadows of the store. However, his calm voice drifted out and lingered in the ears of the crowd. Everyone's faces were slightly startled. Tomorrow earlier? Someone curled the corner of his mouth, seemingly unconcerned and disdainful of Bufang's words. Who did he think he was? Making us, a group of 7th-grade battle saints, line up and wait for your opening? Even the Emperor might not have the right to do so. Line up tomorrow? If your store gets smashed tonight, then there's no need to line up tomorrow. The 7th Master, who was mixed in with the 13 bandits, looked at the imposing Tian Shuzi with a sneer on his face. When Tian Shuzi saw that Bufang had actually ignored him and directly entered the store, he instantly flew into a rage out of humiliation. He, Tian Shuzi, was renowned throughout the world. When had he ever been looked down upon like this? This young man was simply too arrogant. Arrogant brat, do you think you can stop me with a mere puppet? You must be dreaming. Tian Shuzi angrily roared. With a flick of his fingers, the flying sword transformed into a stream of light. Tian Shuzi took a step forward and instantly transformed into a sky full of afterimages. Wrapped in sword light, he charged into the store and headed straight for Bufang. Xiao Bai had a chubby mechanical belly, and his mechanical red eyes were faintly flickering. As the red light swept across, the seventh master, who was hiding in the crowd, trembled all over. Damn it, he was even traumatized. The sky full of sword light and the illusionary afterimages. Tian Shuzi's speed was extremely fast, and he wanted to bypass Xiao Bai in an instant. Tian Shuzi's cultivation level was very high. This move caused everyone present to suck in a breath of cold air. Their expressions became grave. An expert who entered the Battle Saint realm with a sword was definitely terrifying in terms of killing power. Even Xiao Meng felt some pressure when facing this move. And Ai Yan, on the other hand, curled her lip. This coquettish sword move was so coquettish that it gave people goosebumps. However, she had to admit, it was indeed powerful. Sister and Ai Yan. Seeing Tian Shuzi's move, Yi Xiling once again turned her head toward An Ai Yan to ask if she should make a move. However, An Ai Yan still shook her head. However, the grave expression on her face showed that she was also a little hesitant at this moment. Tian Shuzi was incomparably ethereal. Wrapped in sword light, he wanted to scuttle into the store. He was very confident that this move was the imperial sword technique. Regardless of whether it was for killing or escaping, it would be so fast that it would dazzle the eyes of others. How could a mere puppet block it? This arrogant brat, I must teach him a good lesson and let him know what it means to respect the strong. Tian Shuzi sneered in his heart. Bang! Suddenly, with a soft sound, the sky full of sword light disappeared completely in an instant. A long sword fell onto the ground with a jingle, emitting a crisp sound. Tian Shuzi's expression stiffened and he found it hard to believe. His illusionary afterimage rapidly dashed forward in an attempt to overtake Xiao Bai. However, his entire body suddenly began to tremble. In his eyes, a huge mechanical palm was continuously enlarging. Bang! Tian Shuzi's head collided with Xiao Bai's raised palm. In that instant of collision, it was as if a bottle of 5 flavors had been knocked over. Sour, sweet, bitter, and spicy feelings instantly surged into his heart. What the F***ck Tian Shuzi's swiftly moving figure came to a screeching halt as he cursed in his heart. He was directly sent flying by a tremendous force. His body directly spun in the air before he violently crashed onto the ground. The remaining force even pushed him a great distance. Awkward, silence. The scene instantly became a little strange. The crowd stared at each other in disbelief. They looked at Tian Shuzi, who was lying on the ground in a sorry state, clutching his nose and groaning in disbelief. Then, they looked at Xiao Bai, who had an iron-skinned belly. That expression was as if a dog had bitten a lion to death. Yi Xiling's eyes were wide open in an adorable manner. Her rosy and glossy red lips were slightly opened, so wide that an egg could almost be stuffed inside. The corners of An Ai Yan's mouth curled up as she let out a long sigh of relief in her heart. As expected, Owner Bu was not out of his mind. Instead, he had the ability to do so. Even though she did not know how much of a coincidence the previous scene was, but to be able to send an attacking 7th-grade battle saint flying with a single slap. Xiao Bai, you are awesome! An Ai Yan was overjoyed. Tian Shuzi covered his nose as he stood up from the ground. In that instant, his nose had come into contact with Whitey's mechanical palm. The pain he felt when his nose collided with Whitey's mechanical palm made him want to cry. He was enraged, thoroughly enraged. Previously, He only wanted to teach this arrogant brat a lesson. Now, he wanted to dismantle this mechanical puppet that had humiliated him. He almost failed miserably due to his carelessness. This was simply humiliating. Buzz. With a sword hum, the long sword on the ground whizzed up and floated in front of Tianshuzi. His expression turned solemn, and there seemed to be tiny swords swirling in his eyes. Then, with a light flick of his fingers, the long sword split into two, two into four, four into a huge pile. The densely packed long sword floated in front of him. Attack my sword! Chapter 200. Bufang staggered back to the kitchen and let out a light breath. The rich smell of alcohol emanated from his mouth. After drinking 2 cups of this wine, Bufang felt dizzy. He had to admit that the strength of this new wine was much stronger than that of the Ice Heart Jade Urn wine. After cleaning up all the wine jars in the kitchen, there were only 3 white jade wine jars left. They contained the freshly brewed spirit wine with a fragrance that could cover half of the imperial city. The 3 white jade wine jars were sealed with clay. The rich fragrance of the wine was also sealed within the wine jars, no longer emitting. Bufang patted the white jade wine jar and licked his lip. The smell of alcohol emanated from his mouth. Looking at the white jade wine jar, Bufang muttered to himself for a while. It was time to give this wine a name, a spirit wine brewed with 3 types of 7th-grade spirit herbs. Should he call it the 3 treasures wine? Bufang hurriedly shook his head. This name was too awkward. It would lower the wine's value. It feels like a burning flame in a sip, but it feels like ice when it enters the throat. How about ice fire wine? No, it's still too old-fashioned. Frost Blaze Path Understanding wine? Let's call it Frost Blaze Path Understanding Brew. Bufang rubbed his chin and muttered to himself for a while. His heart was burning. Frost Blaze Path Understanding Brew was much stronger than the Ice Heart Jade Urn wine. He wondered how it would compare to the Dragon's Breath. Bufang knew that the Dragon's Breath came from Ni Yan's description. Since he had never tasted the Dragon's Breath, he was unable to make a judgment. System, can you compare the Frost Blaze Path Understanding Brew and the Dragon's Breath? Bufang asked the system expectantly. However, the system was silent for a while before replying seriously and solemnly. The evaluation must be made by someone who has tasted the Dragon's Breath. Therefore, the host has not completed the abrupt task. Please continue to work hard. However, the Frost Blaze Path Understanding Brew has been recorded. The selling price will now be evaluated. The system's answer was beyond Bufang's expectations. He was slightly stunned on the spot. Must the person who had tasted the Dragon's Breath be able to judge? Bufang couldn't help but furrow his brows. But very quickly, his brows relaxed and the corners of his mouth twitched. There was only one person in the imperial capital who had tasted the Dragon's Breath, and that was Ni Yan. Therefore, as long as Ni Yan tasted the Frost Blaze Path Understanding Brew tomorrow, he would naturally be able to make a judgment. The system was evaluating the selling price. Bufang didn't know what the selling price would be, but there was one thing that Bufang was sure of: it definitely wouldn't be cheap. For a while, there was still no result. Bufang was already sleepy from the alcohol. He yawned and walked out of the kitchen, preparing to close the door and go back upstairs to sleep. Xiao Bai stood at the entrance of the store like an unshakable mountain. The red glow in its mechanical eyes flickered continuously. The area in front of Tianshuzi was filled with countless swords. These swords were formed by the sword in his hand. Tianshuzi had a solemn expression on his face. Blood flowed down from his nose and stained his white beard. "Slay this metal puppet for me." With a light shout, Tianshuzi moved his mind and the true energy in his body surged out. With a tinkling sound, the densely packed sword shadows whizzed toward Xiao Bai. The sword shadows that blotted out the sky seemed to have transformed into a rain of swords. It was so dense that it sent chills down one's spine and made one's heart tremble. This rain of swords contained Tian Shuzi's sword energy. This was the sword energy of a 7th grade battle saint. Its power was extremely powerful and extraordinary. As it poured down, even a city gate would collapse. An ordinary 7th grade battle saint would not even have the courage to resist this move. This move was extremely terrifying. The surrounding people were in awe. They all had a considerable understanding of Tian Shuzi's terrifying strength. Xiao Bai's plump figure seemed so tiny in the midst of the rain of swords. He was like a small boat in the middle of a vast ocean that could be capsized at any moment. A mechanical voice rang out. Xiao Bai raised his mechanical eyes, and a red glow swept across the rain of swords. In the next instant, the rain of swords suddenly engulfed him. Ha ha! Shatter for me! Tian Shuzi laughed heartily. He wiped away the blood flowing down from his nose with an incomparably joyful expression. Suddenly, his laughter came to a screeching halt. Because in front of him, the rain of swords seemed to have been swallowed by a bottomless pit, and the number of swords was constantly decreasing. In just a short while, only a few sword shadows were left. The mighty aura instantly became incomparably small. Tian Shuzi's eyes widened as he stared at Xiao Bai. He stretched out a finger and could not help but tremble. Damn it, how could there be such a terrifying puppet in this world? A red glow flashed across Xiao Bai's mechanical eyes. The fine iron longsword in his hand was immediately bent by his grip. With a snap, it was forcefully snapped into two. A crisp sound echoed in the alleyway that was so quiet that even a pin drop could be heard. Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air in that instant. Tian Shuzi even spat out a mouthful of blood. His face was filled with disappointment as he retreated several steps and his entire body trembled. That was a spirit sword that he had refined using his blood essence. To think that it was actually snapped into pieces by the puppet in front of him. Tian Shuzi felt his kidneys twitch, and he felt extremely weak. Troublemakers will be stripped as an example to others. Xiao Bai's mechanical voice rang out. Everyone was taken aback, and did not understand what was going on. When the 7th master, who was hiding in the crowd, heard this familiar nightmarish voice, he was so frightened that his entire body began to tremble like a sieve. It's here again. Crazy clothes stripping demon. Xiao Bai threw the broken longsword in his hand onto the ground and raised his palm. With a snapping sound, his palm actually extended and appeared above Tian Shuzi's head. He grabbed Tian Shuzi's head and lifted him up. That was a palm that was capable of crushing a spirit sword. Everyone felt a chill run down their spines. If this palm exerted force, Tian Shuzi's head would definitely not be as hard as a spirit sword. The consequences would naturally be unimaginable. However, the reality was not as the crowd imagined. Even though the scene was still so beautiful that it was hard to look straight at it. Rip! Tian Shuzi felt a chill run through his entire body. The robe on his body was actually torn apart by this iron lump. Oh my God! What was this iron lump trying to do? Was it so deranged that it wouldn't even let an old man off? The 7th master's teeth were chattering. This familiar scene, this blinding scene, all of this caused his heart to ache. The red glow in Xiao Bai's eyes swept across Tian Shuzi's naked body. Then, with a flick of its arm, it threw the lifeless Tian Shuzi away. Like a sandbag, he was thrown into the distance, causing a cloud of dust to rise. And Ai Yen blinked her eyes and hurriedly covered Yi Ziling's eyes with her hands. Little girl, don't look. The 13 bandits suddenly felt their teeth aching. The sound of inhaling breaths rose and fell. Damn it, it was just as the 7th master had said. This iron lump was a clothes-stripping maniac. It didn't kill you, but it still wanted to strip you. It was simply deranged. Tian Shuzi crawled up from the ground. As the wind blew past, his balls were slightly cold. His old face was deathly pale. He had already sobered up from the temptation of the fine wine. How could he still drink wine when his clothes were gone? The iron lump puppet in front of him had an extremely valiant battle prowess. This was the store's trump card. No wonder it dared to sit on a 5 stripes path understanding tree. It turned out that it had a puppet that could casually strip off the clothes of a 7th grade battle saint. How terrifying! Tian Shuzi no longer had the face to stay here and watch. With a casual wave of his hand, several long swords appeared in his hand. With a pinch of his fingers, these long swords began to revolve around his lower body, as if they had transformed into an apron. At least, they were able to block off that blinding scene. Xiao Yu was dumbfounded. As expected of the ancestor of the Void Sword Pavilion, he knew how to have fun. Tap tap. The faint sound of footsteps rang out. The drunkenness on Bu Fang's face had yet to recede. He walked to the entrance and shot a glance at the naked Tian Shuzi, who was using the revolving swords to cover his lower body. The corners of his mouth twitched. Patting Xiao Bai's plump belly, Bu Fang simply said, "We're closed. If you want wine, come earlier tomorrow and line up. Oh, there's a limited amount of wine. First come, first serve." Bu Fang simply said. Xiao Bai turned around and returned to the store. He went straight into the kitchen. Bu Fang, on the other hand, closed the door under the dumbfounded gazes of the crowd. After closing the door, Bu Fang felt his eyelids constantly struggling. He was extremely sleepy. He lightly exhaled a breath filled with the strong scent of wine and returned to his room on the 2nd floor. He took a bath, sprawled on his bed, and fell into a deep sleep. There's a limited amount of wine. First come, first served. These words caused many people's eyes to narrow. With all sorts of thoughts in their minds, they all retreated. It seems like this wine can only be drunk tomorrow. Rob? The blinding scene of Tian Shuzi was still vivid in their minds. They were not fools and naturally would not make a move on a clothes-stripping maniac like Xiao Bai. Let's go. Tonight's show is over. Let's hurry up and drink tomorrow morning, Ai Yen said as she patted Yi Ziling's head. Then, she pulled the ladder and left the alleyway. Chapter 201. In the pitch-black night sky, 2 crescent moons twinkled and resonated with each other. Around the crescent moons, tens of thousands of stars bloomed brilliantly. The crescent moon's brilliance sprinkled down, covering the earth with a thin veil. In the imperial city, inside a luxurious mansion, Zhao Mushing stood in the courtyard. His body was draped with moonlight, and he had a kind and benevolent countenance. His gentle eyes gazed at the serpent woman timidly looking back at him. "Did you say that you came to the imperial city to look for Ownerbu?" Zhao Mushing's eyes seemed to be slightly squinting, giving off a benevolent feeling. His body emitted a layer of faint golden brilliance, instantly calming the uneasiness in Yu Fu's heart. "Yes." Yu Fu swayed her serpentine tail and slightly shrunk her body. The corners of Zhao Mushing's mouth suddenly curled up, and the gentle expression on his face became even more intense. "Don't be afraid, I am very familiar with Ownerbu. Perhaps I can bring you to him." Yu Fu froze for a moment, then her beautiful eyes suddenly lit up. She was completely unfamiliar with the imperial city and had no idea where the store Bu Fang spoke of was located. If this human before her was telling the truth, then it was indeed a good idea. If she could find Ownerbu, then her father would be saved. The Serpent Men tribe is in the illusory spirit swamp, right? That is very far from here. Why did you come all the way to the imperial city to look for Ownerbu? Zhao Mushing asked. Yu Fu's heart trembled, and she vigilantly looked at him. Yu Fu's vigilance caused the expression on Zhao Mushing's face to slightly stiffen. His gaze gradually became cold, and the auspicious feeling of golden brilliance on his body also disappeared. Zhao Mushing's eyes slightly narrowed, as if there was a strange brilliance circulating in the depths of his eyes. Yu Fu's gaze slightly slackened, and she couldn't help but say what she needed to say. "Someone, take this serpent woman away and watch her carefully. I didn't expect this serpent woman to be related to Bu Fang. What a pleasant surprise, Zhao Mushing calmly said. Then, several figures stepped into the mansion, dragged Serpent Woman Yu Fu away, and locked her up. Serpent men were very rare in the Light Wind Empire. Zhao Mushing had originally brought the 3 serpent men back out of curiosity, but he did not expect that he would actually get information about Bufang from them. Bufang was acquainted with the Nagas? Was Bufang from the illusory spirit swamp? The only power in the illusory spirit swamp is the unfathomable White Cloud Villa. Could it be that Bufang is a disciple of the White Cloud Villa? But if it's someone from the White Cloud Villa, why would they open a restaurant in the Imperial City? Zhao Mushing thought of many things in an instant. The Mahayana Island was a powerful sect that was second only to the Wuliang Mountains Celestial Arcanum sect among the 10 great sections. Therefore, he knew a lot of secrets. The White Cloud Villa was a very mysterious force. Perhaps only the equally mysterious Celestial Arcanum sect could compare to it. With his hands behind his back, Zhao Mushing paced around the mansion. After pondering for a long time, the corners of his mouth curled up. With a snap of his fingers, a figure appeared from the darkness. It was a bald young monk dressed in black linen. There were 2 rows of scars on his head. One of them was a hideous centipede-like scar that extended from the corner of his eyebrows all the way to the back of his neck. Elder. The young monk had a smile on his face and looked extremely harmless. If it were not for the centipede-like scar, he would have looked rather simple and honest. Shangde, you are the disciple with the highest cultivation level among the disciples of the Mahayana Island. Tomorrow I will assign you a mission. Go and complete it, Zhao Mushing said to the young monk with a smile. The young monk Shangde said with a smile, Elder, please tell me. If Shangde can accomplish it, I will not hesitate to go through fire and water. Zhao Mushing pursed his lips. Even though this young monk Shangde was a disciple of the Mahayana Island's Buddhist sect, his mouth was full of lies. The lies that came out of his mouth did not even need to be drafted. Tomorrow, go to Fong Fong's little store and subtly mention the topic of the serpent men to the owner Bu. See how Bufang reacts, Zhao Mushing said. The young monk Shangde was taken aback. Fong Fong's little store? The one that has been the talk of the town lately, the one that owns the 5 stripes path understanding tree? Zhao Mushing nodded. The young monk's eyes suddenly lit up. That glint was extremely crafty. Just you wait, Elder. Shangde will go there tomorrow. I've been wanting to visit that store for a long time. The 5 stripes path understanding tree is a true treasure of heaven and earth. Remember, don't fight recklessly. You only need to know how Bufang will react, Zhao Mushing said. The young monk nodded with a smile, then turned around and left the courtyard. Zhao Mushing watched as Shangde's silhouette disappeared into the distance. No one knew what he was thinking. Miss, the group of battle saints has all returned. Obviously, they did not drink the wine. In an inn, Wu Yunbai was sitting cross-legged cultivating. Master Ah Wu leaned against the window, watching the group of battle saints flying by under the moonlight. He could not help but say this to Wu Yunbai. Wu Yunbai did not respond to him, but simply nodded. She had naturally smelled the aroma of the wine, but she could not be bothered to compete with the group of battle saints. Nowadays, the imperial city was in a state of flux, and there were many battle saints. The White Cloud Villa did not send many people, so they could not be considered a powerful force. Naturally, they did not dare to cause too much trouble. She planned to find Bufang the next day and ask for the seed of the monarch lotus. With the help of the seed, she could break through to 7th grade battle saint. That way, she would have a greater say in the imperial city. When that time came, she would have the confidence to get involved in the ownership of the 5 stripes path understanding tree. Damn! Miss, there's a battle saint running naked under the moonlight. Heavens, are all the battle saints in the imperial city so open-minded? Master Ah Wu exclaimed again. Wu Yunbai closed her eyes tightly, her forehead suddenly filled with black lines. Your sister is cultivating, can you not be so startled? I almost got a chest ache while cultivating. But a battle saint running naked. Wu Yunbai imagined the scene. TSK, the scene was too beautiful, too painful. Light Wind Empire Imperial Palace, Main Hall. The lights were faintly lit. Ji Qingxue sat on the dragon throne with a frown. He was naturally aware of the influx of battle saints in the imperial city, but he couldn't do anything about it. As he listened to the eunuch's report, the corner of his mouth suddenly curled. Owner Bu's move was not bad. He intimidated the battle saints who were already restless, and gave the imperial city a chance to ease its tension. The pressure from these battle saints is too strong, and the order of the imperial city is hard to manage. But I'm really looking forward to Owner Bu's new wine tomorrow. Without a doubt, it will be stronger than the Iceheart Jade Urn wine. This makes my heart itch unbearably, Ji Qingxue said with a bitter face. Sighing, Ji Qingxue stood up from the dragon throne, paced a few steps, and asked the eunuch beside him, "How is the ghost chef doing recently? Did he do anything special?" "Replying to your majesty, the ghost chef Wang Ding has been very quiet for the past month. He stays in the small courtyard prepared by your majesty, cooks, takes a stroll. There are no other special actions," the eunuch said with his head lowered. Ji Qingxue nodded. He hated this ghost chef to the core. If he hadn't spread the news, how would it have caused such a disturbance in the imperial city? But the other party was a veteran battle saint after all. If he wanted to make a move, the price he would have to pay would be too high. Continue to monitor him, and make preparations tomorrow. "I'm leaving the palace," Ji Qingxue said. The eunuch immediately raised his head, his face full of astonishment. Early in the morning star leaped out of the horizon. Bufang opened his drowsy eyes, then his eyes suddenly widened. He sat up from his bed, his expression drowsy and confused. What happened last night? Last night, something seemed to have happened. Oh, right. I drank too much, and I was a little dazed. Bufang mumbled to himself, patted his stiff face, then climbed out of bed and finished washing up. He walked to the kitchen and began his daily training of cutting and carving skills. After drinking 2 cups of Frost Blaze Path Understanding brew last night, his entire body was dizzy. He only vaguely remembered what happened. It seemed like Xiao Bai stripped someone's clothes last night and made them run around naked. As for who it was, he couldn't remember clearly. Since he couldn't remember clearly, he was too lazy to remember. Bufang twirled his knife, then returned it to the knife rack and began cooking the sweet and sour ribs. Opening the door, a faint chill rushed in. It had been more than a month since the spring festival, and the weather was gradually warming up. Opening the store door, Bufang placed the sweet and sour ribs in front of Blackie. After stroking the latter's smooth and untainted hair, Bufang stood up. However, before he could return to the store, a clamor of footsteps came from the alleyway. Bufang was instantly puzzled. Turning around, he saw a group of people majestically approaching. Leading them were 13 boorish and unrestrained burly men. Oh, among those burly men, there was even a pale-faced middle-aged man. Behind the 13 burly men were the majestic 3 barbarians of Ouyang, as well as a few people whose names Bufang couldn't name. The aura on these people was very vigorous. With his sharp eyes, Bufang saw Fatty Jean and the others cowering behind this group of people. At this moment, their faces were filled with confusion. It was so early in the morning. Where did so many experts with powerful auras come from? Couldn't they let him eat breakfast in peace? Chapter 202. Looking at the burly men with powerful auras, Fatty Jean and the others were like aggrieved little girls who were squeezed to the back. Their strength was inferior and they did not dare to show themselves. They also had unspeakable bitterness in their hearts. Bufang was slightly taken aback. This group of people came really early. Could they all be here for the Frost Blaze Path Understanding brew? Even though it was mentioned last night that it was first come, first served, This group of people had arrived way too early. Owner Bu, good morning. Can we buy the wine now? Ouyang scratched the back of his head as he looked at Bu Fong with glowing eyes. Last night, with a group of battle saints present, the 3 barbarians of Ouyang did not even dare to breathe loudly. How could they possibly get their hands on the wine? Therefore, they came early today to buy the wine while the 7th grade battle saints were not paying attention. Hey! Did I allow you to buy it first? The 13 bandits stared at the 3 barbarians of Ouyang. The cultivation level of this group was at the peak of 6th grade battle emperor. How could the 3 barbarians of Ouyang compare to them? In terms of aura, they were able to suppress the 3 of them. How infuriating! Since their strength was inferior, the 3 barbarians of Ouyang could only swallow their anger and remain silent. Owner Bu, I am Hui Feng from Mazhou. Last night, after smelling the aroma of the wine brewed by Owner Bu, I could not bear it and had a sleepless night. This morning, I brought my brothers here to buy the wine. I hope Owner Bu will grant us our wish. Hui Feng, the leader of the 13 bandits of Mazhou, said to Bu Fong with a gentle smile. Among the 13 bandits of Mazhou, other than their leader, Hui Feng, who was a scholarly man, the other 12 were all burly men. They were quite an oddity. Bu Fong glanced at them and lightly nodded his head. Then, he walked toward the store. As he walked, he said, "Line up and buy the wine in an orderly manner." Line up? The 13 bandits were confused. Did they have to line up to buy something? They were bandits and were already used to robbing people along the way. The concept of lining up did not even exist in their mind. When Bu Fong suddenly told them to line up, they were confused for a moment. "Hurry up and line up according to the seniority of U.S. brothers," Hui Feng said with a frown. He took the lead to stand at the entrance and strode into the store. Behind him was the 2nd master, the 3rd master and so on. When Bu Fong returned to the store, the solemn voice of the system rang in his mind. The evaluation of the Frost Blaze Path Understanding Brew has been completed. Final result. Selling price, 500 crystals per cup. Bu Fong's stride froze as he sucked in a breath of cold air. 500 crystals per cup. Damn it. So King expensive. But I like it. The corners of Bu Fong's mouth twitched as he stepped into the kitchen again. The moment Hui Feng stepped into the store, he instantly felt a peculiar ripple enveloping his entire body. This ripple caused his eyes to suddenly light up. The undulations of the Path Understanding tree could aid one in cultivation. It was extremely helpful to one's comprehension. Hui Feng's gaze turned and landed on a small tree sitting on top of an earthy yellow flower pot in the corner of the store. This small tree had already grown to a certain size and was almost as tall as a human. Its branches were brandishing their claws, and its tender green leaves rustled. Waves of surging spirit energy were emitted from it, along with a peculiar Path Understanding ripple. The 5 Stripes Path Understanding tree is indeed worthy of its reputation. If I could possess this precious tree and cultivate every day, breaking through to 7th grade Battle Saint wouldn't be a problem at all. Hui Feng's gaze was filled with greed. At this moment, the great bandit's instinct in his heart wriggled once again. However, when he recalled the frightening mechanical puppet in Bu Fong's store last night, Hui Feng decided to forget about it. That mechanical puppet was in existence that could even handle a 7th grade Battle Saint. His cultivation level was only at the peak of 6th grade Battle Emperor, so he was definitely no match for it. There was no need for him to seek humiliation and be stripped for nothing. Bu Fong walked out of the kitchen with a white jade wine jar in his arms. His face was devoid of any expression. He placed a few blue and white porcelain cups on the table and took out a bamboo tube. He placed the white jade wine jar on the table and tapped it with the bamboo tube, drawing Hui Feng's attention away from the 5 Stripes Path Understanding tree. "This is the wine you wanted to buy. It's called the Frost Blaze Path Understanding Brew," Bu Fong calmly said. After Bu Fong finished speaking, he removed the clay seal of the white jade wine jar. Instantly, a rich and intoxicating wine aroma wafted out. This wine aroma was unbridled and wafted out in an instant. It enveloped the entire alleyway and continued to expand outward. Just by smelling the wine aroma, the three barbarians of Ouyang couldn't help but salivate. This aroma was simply too mesmerizing. Hui Feng's eyes lit up as he gazed passionately at the white jade wine jar. People in their line of work were naturally wine lovers. Wine could boost one's courage and was indispensable in their lives. Wine. Great wine. Great wine. This wine aroma, it's simply superb. Hui Feng was full of praises, his face trembling. With regards to such praise, Bufang naturally accepted it gladly. He had expended a great deal of effort on this wine. Naturally, it was a great wine. The menu is behind you, and so is the price. Take a look, Bufang said. There's no need to look. Owner Bu, this jar of wine, I'll buy it. Hui Feng waved his hand in a forthright manner and said with great vigor. However, Bufang was still expressionless. He glanced at him and said, You can't afford it. I can't afford it? Hui Feng was taken aback. Then, he let out a carefree laugh and said, Owner Bu, don't look down on me. Even though I'm not filthy rich, I can still afford to buy a jar of wine. Even though the wine's aroma was extremely rich, it was still just wine after all. How high could the price go? Hui Feng didn't care about this at all. The menu is behind you. Take a look before you speak. Bufang couldn't be bothered to explain anything to him. Hui Feng furrowed his brows. He was already a little displeased. I'm just buying a jar of wine. What are you waiting for? However, Hui Feng still listened to Bufang's words and turned his head to look at the menu behind him. Hui Feng's pupils shrank as he read from the beginning. This menu was simply terrifying. Was this really a menu? Damn, even elixirs sold were not this expensive, right? Wine. Where was the wine? Ice Heart Jade Urn wine. No, not this. Frost Blaze Path Understanding Brew, this was it. Hui Feng scanned the menu and finally saw the name Frost Blaze Path Understanding Brew. However, when he saw the price, Hui Feng's nonchalant gaze froze. Then, his pupils gradually widened and his face looked like he had seen a ghost. Frost Blaze Path Understanding Brew, 1 cup for 500 crystals. 1 cup, 500 crystals, crystals, you're robbing. Hui Feng's lips were trembling. Was there anyone who did business like this? Selling a cup of wine for 500 crystals, this was blatant extortion. The 13 bandits of Mazhou being extorted. This was the biggest joke in the world. Bufang glanced at him, nodded seriously, and said, A cup of wine is sold for 500 crystals. The price is fair, and I am honest with both young and old. It was as if an invisible arrow had pierced Hui Feng's heart. The price was fair. I'm not well educated, don't cheat me. Don't make a fuss, Owner Bu. Let's do business properly. Hui Feng's expression was a little ugly. This price was a little too expensive. Mazhou was a barren land to begin with. As bandits, they did not earn much. Sometimes, they would not even be able to open their business for an entire month. Spending 500 crystals for a cup of wine was definitely a huge loss. Bufang held the bamboo tube and lightly knocked on the white jade jar of wine. He took a cup and inserted the bamboo tube into the jar, scooping out a tube of light green wine. The sound of the wine bubbling rang out and the fragrance of the wine became even more intense. Spirit energy was mixed in with the wine fragrance and wrapped around Hui Feng's heart like silk. Bufang poured the light green wine into the cup. Dense spirit energy lingered above the cup and 3 cloud patterns appeared. It was too beautiful to behold. Whether you buy it or not, the wine is here. Bufang gave Hui Feng a glance and said seriously. Gulp. The rich wine fragrance made Hui Feng's throat move. His alcohol addiction was instantly triggered. You win. Hui Feng was furious. This was a naked temptation and robbery. However, he could not resist the temptation of this light green wine. "I'm going to buy it. Damn it!" Hui Feng clenched his fist and casually swung it. Instantly, a large bag of crystals landed on the table. This was almost all of his savings. His heart was bleeding. Bufang's eyebrows twitched. He happily grabbed the crystals and put them into the system's dimensional storage. "This wine belongs to you. Please taste it carefully. You might be surprised," Bufang said. Chapter 203. Hui Feng carefully picked up the small blue and white porcelain wine cup with 2 fingers, fearing that he would accidentally spill the wine. Every drop of wine was worth a crystal. His heart was bleeding, but his mouth was smacking it incessantly. Saliva dripped down his mouth as he smelled the rich wine fragrance from the cup. He was somewhat impatient. The light green wine was flowing in the exquisite blue and white porcelain cup. The wine was slightly viscous. A faint luster blossomed, and a dense mist filled the air above the cup. The rich wine fragrance was like a small snake, burrowing into his nostrils and opening up all the pores on his body. Just smelling the fragrance of the wine made Hui Feng's body tremble. His eyes were filled with an intoxicated look. He stretched out his lips and gently took a sip. The light green wine flowed into his mouth. In an instant, it was like a scorching flame, causing his entire face to wrinkle and his tongue to feel like it was on fire. The scorching heat disappeared as quickly as it came. The moment the wine entered his throat, it became as cold as ice. It almost froze Hui Feng to death. However, the refreshing feeling that penetrated his heart caused Hui Feng's eyes to widen. As the wine entered his stomach, it instantly exploded 3 times. He involuntarily burped, filling the entire hall with the fragrance of wine. Good wine! Hui Feng's refined face was covered with dizziness. The wine's strength was so strong. As the 3 bursts began, the wine rushed straight into his brain, almost causing him to faint. 2 heavens of ice and fire. As expected of the 2 heavens of ice and fire. This wine doesn't seem like a wine that can be found in this world. Hui Feng laughed. Raising his head, he drank the rest of the wine in the cup in one gulp. The fiery heat that entered his mouth and the cold taste that flowed down his throat made his entire body feel refreshed. Boom! As the cup entered his stomach, the dense wine fragrance within the blue and white porcelain cup dissipated. There was still a faint spiritual energy fluctuation within it. Hui Feng's face was flushed red, and his eyes were overflowing with light. His nostrils exhaled, and spiritual energy constantly gushed out. Hui Feng felt dizzy as the world spun around him. Everything in front of him seemed to have become a little blurry. He narrowed his eyes as the rumbling Tao comprehension sound resounded in his ears. The sound was like thunder, as if it had directly resounded in his mind. The second master and third master of the 13 great bandits, who were standing not far from Hui Feng, narrowed their eyes when they saw Hui Feng's swaying appearance. "Big brother!" Second master took a step forward and supported Hui Feng, who had collapsed after taking a step. Hugging Hui Feng's body, the thick smell of alcohol assaulted his nostrils. Old Air's face was immediately filled with a strange expression. Was Big Brother drunk? What the f***ck? Just 1 glass of wine and he's already drunk. The second master and third master looked at each other and saw the strange look in each other's eyes. Their elder brother's alcohol tolerance wasn't bad, and it was completely unimaginable for him to be knocked out by a single cup. "What did you do to our big brother?" The disbelieving second master turned his head and angrily glared at Bufang. This brat in front of him must have done something to the wine. Otherwise, why would Big Brother be knocked out by a single cup? Bufang expressionlessly looked at the burly man who turned his head and angrily glared at him. He indifferently said, "As you can see, this guy is knocked out by a single cup." The third master angrily stood up. "You're lying. We are well aware of Big Brother's alcohol tolerance. You brat, don't even think of deceiving us. Tell me, what did you do to Big Brother? I said he's drunk. If you don't believe me, just drink a cup, Bufang unhurriedly said. The third master was instantly taken aback. Then, he immediately shouted, then hurry up and give me a cup. 1 cup for 500 crystals. If you don't believe me, look at the menu behind you. Bufang felt that it was better to first state the price. What? 500 crystals? Why don't you just go rob someone? When the third master heard this, he almost bit his own tongue. 500 crystals for a cup of wine. Did the owner go crazy thinking about crystals? If you don't want to order, then leave the store. If you cause trouble, you know the consequences. Bufang was incomparably calm. The third master clenched his fist. He glanced at the drunk Big Brother who was lying in the arms of the second master. His face was flushed red, and he was constantly breathing out a rich and intoxicating aroma of wine. His heart tightened. 500 crystals. Damn it. Brothers, lend me some crystals so that I can expose this black-hearted owner's true colors. The third master clenched his teeth and turned around to borrow crystals from his brothers. The second master did not say anything and directly shoved all of the crystals into the third master's hands. The others also handed over their crystals with some hesitation. They were not Hui Feng and did not have many crystals. However, after pooling them together, it was still easy for the 12 of them to gather 500 crystals. With a "pa" sound, the third master slammed the crystals on the table. Bufang poured him a cup of wine. After carefully sizing up the gorgeous wine, he could not hold back the craving in his heart. He raised his head and gulped it down. This was his drinking habit. He was different from Hui Feng, who was more refined. He was a burly man and gulping down a mouthful was a common occurrence. However, this wine was not ordinary wine. Even Bufang blinked in surprise as he looked at the third master, who was stuttering. The third master gulped down the wine in his cup in one gulp. His entire face instantly scrunched up. The feeling of ice and fire instantly burst forth. In addition to the feeling of the 3 marks exploding, the third master was unable to extricate himself. His entire body felt so refreshed that it felt like he was flying. Without a doubt, the third master's face also became flushed. He pointed at Bufang as his eyeballs rolled. Without even taking a step forward, he fell to the ground and fell into a deep sleep. Another one passed out after 1 cup. The remaining members of the 13 bandits were all stunned. This wine actually passed out after 1 cup. Damn it, it was simply too refreshing. They could not help but want to give it a try. However, after knowing the price, they were all scared silly and left the store speechlessly. The 7th master was very conflicted. When he stepped into the store, there was still a lingering fear in his heart. It was here that he was crazily stripped and ran back to the inn naked. He was utterly humiliated. Now that he was standing in this position again, his state of mind was completely different. It was obvious that he did not have any crystals. His crystals had all been lent to the third master. Now, he did not even have a single crystal in his pocket. I'm very sorry, this store does not allow credit. If you do not have any crystals, please leave. Bufang was merciless. The 7th master clenched his teeth in anger. He only wanted to drink a cup of wine. Why was it so difficult? Xiao Bai's chubby figure was faintly discernible in the kitchen. The 7th master's heart instantly turned cold. A scene that was still fresh in his memory appeared in his mind. He immediately turned around and left without hesitation. Causing trouble in the store? What a joke. He did not want to run around naked again. In the end, the 13 great bandits arrived in a grandiose manner. In the end, they only carried 2 useless people back to the inn. How infuriating! They did not even get to drink the wine. The 13 great bandits carried their 2 brothers and walked out of the alleyway. They were greeted by Ni Yen and a sleepy Yi Xiling. What a strong smell of wine! Are they drunk? Yen wrinkled her nose and could not help but murmur. Then, she pulled Yi Xiling and arrived in front of Bu Fang's store. However, there was a long line in front of the store. The strong smell of wine wafted out from the store, making Yan's heart itch. Yi Xiling, on the other hand, did not feel anything. She did not have a specific concept of wine. This owner Bu is really interesting. Last time, I said that the wine in his store was not good. This time, he made a new wine for me. Could it be that he wants to compete with Dragon's Breath? Yen was extremely excited. This was the first time she saw a wine that could be compared to the old drunkard's Dragon's Breath. The two of them did not cut the line. They obediently lined up behind Fatty Jean and the others. In front of the imperial city's gate of supreme harmony, two figures slowly walked out. Ji Qingxue was wearing a brocade robe and a jade crown on his head. He walked out of the imperial palace with a smile on his face. Beside him was a eunuch who was also wearing a brocade robe. It was Lian Fu, who had aged a lot after not seeing him for a long time. Uncle Lian, let's go to Owner Bu's store now. Otherwise, we won't be able to make it in time for the good wine, Ji Qingxue said with a smile. Lian Fu pinched his orchid fingers together, nodded, and said with a sharp voice, "As your majesty wishes." Chapter 204. Ouyang Xiaoyi skipped into the alleyway, and was stunned the moment she entered. She blankly stared at the long queue. She saw quite a few familiar faces in the queue. Some were regular customers of the store, while others were unfamiliar faces. "I was wondering why I didn't hear your snoring so early in the morning. So you guys have come to the smelly boss's place to secretly drink." The moment Ouyang Xiaoyi stepped into the store, she saw three burly and familiar figures. Who else could it be other than her three foolish brothers? The three barbarians of Ouyang turned their heads to look at Ouyang Xiaoyi. Their faces were scrunched up and they looked extremely wronged. Ouyang Xiaoyi was immediately startled. "Brother, can you not scare people in broad daylight? Owner Bu, this wine is really expensive." The eldest brother, Ouyang Zhen, pursed his lips and felt extremely wronged. All the crystals the three of them had were not even enough to buy a cup of wine. This was simply ridiculous. They never expected that not only was the wine brewed by Bu Fang ridiculously expensive, it was also sold by the cup. How much was there in one cup? It was not even enough to fill the gaps between one's teeth. "Xiaoyi, my good sister, can you lend me some crystals?" Ouyang Wu shamelessly moved closer to Ouyang Xiaoyi, causing the latter to immediately become vigilant. Ouyang Xiaoyi's eyes widened as she suspiciously glanced at the menu. After scanning through it, she discovered the newly added menu at the bottom. Frost Blaze Path Understanding Brew, 1 cup/500 crystals. Ouyang Xiaoyi was dumbfounded. 500 crystals per cup? Did the smelly boss make a mistake? What kind of wine could cost 500 crystals per cup? The Ice Heart Jade Urn wine could not even compare to a tenth of it. No wonder her three brothers wanted to borrow crystals from her. "My good sister, Xiaoyi, this wine is really too mesmerizing. If I don't drink it, I definitely won't be able to sleep tonight. I won't even have the strength to walk." Ouyang Di cried miserably. The scene of three burly men complaining to a little lowly with snot and tears streaming down their faces was indeed too beautiful. Ouyang Xiaoyi patted the cheeks of her three brothers and took out some crystals from her pouch, handing them over to her three brothers. Ouyang Xiaoyi was the treasure of the Ouyang clan, so the thing she lacked the least was crystals. "Thank you, little sister." Ouyang Zhen took the crystals and was immediately overjoyed. Adding the crystals from the three of them, they had a total of 500 crystals, enough to buy a cup of wine. Bu Fang gently scooped with his bamboo tube as the sound of the flowing wine echoed throughout the store. As the fragrance of the wine spread out, the three barbarians of Ouyang were completely intoxicated and intoxicated. "Here, your Frost Blaze Path Understanding Brew. Bufang carefully handed the blue and white porcelain cup to Ouyang-zhen. Ouyang-zhen took it carefully, looking serious and funny. Ouyang-zhen held his wine cup while Ouyang-wu and Ouyang-di stared at him eagerly. The three of them gathered to one side and discussed, "There's only one cup of wine. Each of us will take a sip. No one is allowed to drink more." Ouyang-wu and Ouyang-di quickly nodded. Immediately, Ouyang-zhen narrowed his eyes. He raised his wine cup and took a small sip, drinking exactly 1/3 of it. After drinking, he was completely intoxicated and was unable to extricate himself. Ouyang-wu took the wine cup from his hand and deeply inhaled the fragrance of the wine. He also took a sip. The explosive fragrance of the wine burst forth in his mouth, causing all the hairs on his body to stand on end. Ouyang-di took the wine cup and poured the last bit of wine in the cup into his mouth. The scene of the three burly men carefully drinking this small cup of wine was extremely miserable. The scene seemed to have become a lot more desolate at this moment. However, after drinking this cup of wine, the expressions on the three men's faces changed drastically. Their eyes suddenly widened and the energy within their bodies actually fluctuated. None of them passed out because the three of them drank one cup. Therefore, none of them were drunk, just a little tipsy. The three barbarians of Ouyang had just broken through to 5th grade Battle King around the spring festival after their dedicated cultivation. Now that this cup of wine entered their stomachs, they felt the true energy vortexes within their bodies spinning rapidly and their true energy seemed to be boiling. Their faces flushed red as they walked out of the store. They immediately sat cross-legged in the alleyway and began to cultivate. A faintly discernible path-understanding note was circulating in their ears. Following this path-understanding note, they felt as though many of the problems they faced during cultivation were easily solved. The people queuing up were astonished as they looked at the three brothers who were sitting cross-legged on the cold bricks of the alleyway. The energy within their bodies surged and continuously strengthened. That appearance was as though they had consumed elixirs. Many people's eyes immediately lit up. Could a cup of wine help one break through? Was this for real? A cup of wine actually had an effect comparable to an elixir? And Yan's eyes lit up even more and her heart was burning with passion. Not only Yan, but the others also saw the effects of this wine. Immediately, everyone was a little astonished. Help one break through? This wine was awesome. However, when these people stepped into the store and saw the exorbitant prices, their faces became gloomy and ashen. Most of them could not afford it or they did not have so many crystals on them. There were also people who ransacked their pockets and finally gathered 500 crystals to buy a cup. After drinking it, there was no doubt that they passed out in one cup. When they fell to the ground, they were taken away by their acquaintances. Fatty Jean and the others were not here to drink. They were really here to eat. However, it was obvious that Bufang did not have the time to cook for them. They were not in a hurry and sat to the side, watching this rare scene of wine being sold with great interest. Bufang glanced at the white jade wine jar that had lost half of its liquid. He slightly furrowed his brows and raised his head to say to the crowd, "Frost Blaze Path Understanding Brew, there are only 5 cups left for sale today." 5 cups? And Yen was slightly taken aback. She did not expect that this wine was not only sold by the cup, but also had a freaking limited quantity. However, so be it. It's my turn anyway. The corners of Yan's mouth curled up. She walked in front of Bufang and opened her red lips slightly. She giggled and said, "Owner Bu, why did you think of brewing such a good wine?" Bufang looked at Yan's devastatingly beautiful face and slightly furrowed his brows. He did not choose to answer her question. Instead, he glanced at the Frost Blaze Path Understanding Brew in the white jade wine jar and took a deep breath. "You drink this cup of wine. It's free." Bufang scooped up a cup of wine and handed the blue and white porcelain cup to Yen. Yen was stunned. Ouyang Xiaoyi was stunned. Yi Xiling, who was standing behind Yen, was also stunned. Almost everyone was slightly stunned. What did he mean? What did he mean? Owner Bu, you can't give up your integrity just because this woman is pretty. Why is it free? And Ai Yen unceremoniously took the wine cup that Bufang handed to her. Her red lips exuded a mesmerizing luster. She curled her lips slightly and narrowed her eyes. She knew that Bufang was not the kind of person who would be tempted by beauty. For him to let her drink for free, there was definitely something wrong with him. You should have drunk dragon's breath before. Then, have a good taste of this wine. After you've finished drinking, tell me which is better, Frost Blaze Path Understanding Brew or Dragon's Breath, Bufang said seriously as he looked at Ai Yen. Competing in wine? Ai Yen was slightly taken aback. She did not expect that the reason Bufang would treat her to a wine competition. Moreover, it was Dragon's Breath. Could it be that she had unintentionally mentioned that the Ice Heart Jade Urn wine could not compare to the Dragon's Breath, and Owner Bu had taken it to heart? Owner Bu could not be that bored. Perhaps brewing the Frost Blaze Path Understanding brew was just a coincidence, Ai Yen thought with certainty. However, Bufang had really brewed the Frost Blaze Path Understanding brew for the sake of competing with the Dragon's Breath. If Ai Yen knew Bufang's thoughts, she would definitely not know whether to laugh or cry. After hearing Bufang's words, Ai Yen's curiosity was piqued. Owner Bu seemed to have a lot of confidence in this wine. Her slender and fair fingers that were like beautiful jade pinched the blue and white porcelain cup. She brought her nose close to the cup and took a slight sniff. The fragrance of the wine filled her nostrils and was incomparably intoxicating. Her pink tongue licked around her red lips, mesmerizing and teasing. She lifted the wine cup and took a sip. Chapter 205. Master Awu, wake up. Let's go find Bufang. Inside the inn, a knock sounded on the door. Wu Yunbai, dressed in a white robe, had her hands behind her back as she knocked on the door. A flurry of hurried footsteps could be heard in the room. After a long while, Master Awu walked out of the room and nodded at Wu Yunbai with a sheepish smile. Miss, you're up early today, Master Awu said. Early my ass. The sun is already high up in the sky and it's still early. Come on, let's go find Bufang. Wu Yunbai rolled her eyes at Master Awu and led the way out of the inn. The two of them walked out of the inn, squinted their eyes to determine their direction, and walked toward Fong Fong's little store. They had asked the waiter in the inn, so they were not in the wrong place. The two of them walked for a while and came to a remote alley. According to the waiter, Fong Fong's little store was located in this small alley. The two of them were curious, because this alley was not as secluded as they had imagined. Instead, it was very lively, with people constantly coming out of the alley, carrying drunkards who exuded a strong aroma of alcohol. In the distance, two figures slowly approached. The young man in the lead had a gentle and handsome face, a gentle smile on his lips, and his body exuded an intimidating pressure. The fair-skinned elder beside the young man was a little strange. He walked with a swaying waist, his fingers pinched like an orchid. This strange combination made Wu Yunbai raise her eyebrows, and her expression became serious, because she could sense the cultivation level of the effeminate elder beside the young man was very strong. At least from the aura that he inadvertently revealed, he was even stronger than Master Awu. Nowadays the Imperial City is really a mess. Battle saints can be seen everywhere. Wu Yunbai mumbled to herself, then ignored him and led Master Awu into the alleyway. Uncle Lien, do you know those two? Ji Qingxue looked at Wu Yunbai's back, and gently asked Lien Fu beside him. Lien Fu lightly waved his orchid fingers and said, These two are obviously not from our Light Wind Empire, how would I know them? Then they must be foreign battle saints. Are they also here for the 5 Stripes Path Understanding Tree? Is this thing really that attractive? Ji Qingxue murmured. "Oh my, your majesty, the 5 stripes path understanding tree is a treasure of heaven and earth that can help a 7th grade battle saint step into the 8th grade. Not to mention other battle saints, even this old servant, oh my." "I can't help it," Lian Fu said as he flicked his orchid fingers 3 times. Ji Qingxue nodded. As it could help a 7th grade battle saint advance to 8th grade, the value of the path understanding tree was self-evident. However, this seed had been planted in their imperial palace for so long and they had used so many methods but still failed to grow it. How did it come to life in the hands of owner Bu and was even about to mature? Perhaps Bufang had some soil that could nurture the growth of heaven and earth treasures. Perhaps this 5 stripes path understanding tree was destined not to belong to his palace. Let's go. Let's go and have a look at owner Bu's new wine. Regarding this, I'm looking forward to it very much. Ji Qingxue smiled and strode forward. The light green wine flowed along Ni Yan's pink lips, brushed past her jade-like teeth, and dripped into her mouth. A burning sensation like a raging flame suddenly burst forth in her mouth, causing Ni Yan's fair and pretty face to be instantly covered with a layer of red. Her dainty tongue lightly licked her lips and lightly exhaled. As the wine flowed down her throat, Ni Yan's entire body stiffened like an iceberg. The feeling of heat instantly transforming into ice cold made Ni Yan blush uncontrollably and moan softly. When the 3 explosions burst forth in her abdomen, the feeling made Ni Yan raise her head. Her fine black hair spread out, her pearly white teeth bit her red lips, and her drunken eyes glazed over. Good wine! Taking another sip, the wine's strength instantly surged. Ni Yan felt her entire head become slightly dizzy, and a peculiar path-understanding sound resounded in her ears. Path-understanding sound? Ni Yan's state of mind became a little more focused, and she earnestly sensed the feeling of path-understanding. Swallowing the last drop of wine in the blue and white porcelain cup, that feeling of comfort made Ni Yan's entire body feel a little weak. Yi Xiling, who was standing behind her and observing Ni Yan's movements, hurriedly hugged Ni Yan and asked worriedly, "Sister Ni Yan, are you all right?" Sealing the bottom of an iceberg, the dragon's breath, shocking the world in a single day. Ah, old drunkard, look at how pleased you are. Right now, owner Bu's wine is even better than your dragon's breath. Even better than your dragon's breath. Ni Yan blushed as she laughed out loud, waving her fair and slender arms everywhere. Yi Xiling was very embarrassed. She didn't even know what Ni Yan was talking about. However, the drunken Ni Yan had completely lost the image of a goddess. Although she never had the image of a goddess, Yi Xiling didn't understand Ni Yan's words, but Bufang did. He heard Ni Yan's evaluation of the 2 wines in her drunken stupor. Without a doubt, according to Ni Yan's feelings, the Frost Blaze Path Understanding wine was obviously a notch better. Congratulations to the host for completing the abrupt mission. Research and brew the Frost Blaze Path Understanding wine to surpass the dragon's breath. Mission reward will now be issued. The system's solemn and serious voice rang out in Bufang's mind. Without a doubt, his Frost Blaze Path Understanding wine had surpassed the dragon's breath, and he had finally completed this abrupt mission. Bufang let out a light breath. This was a feeling of relief. The completion of the mission made him feel a little happy. Yi Xiling supported Ni Yan. Suddenly, Ni Yan's delicate body trembled in her arms, and she suddenly opened her eyes. This woman's eyes revealed a look of shock. Her beautiful brows furrowed, and a wave of turbulence surged through Yi Xiling. Ni Yan straightened her body and stood on the spot, deep in thought. Bang, bang, bang! 3 muffled sounds rang out one after another. The people in the queue immediately revealed astonished expressions as they looked toward the 3 barbarians of Ouyang, who were sitting cross-legged on the ice-cold bricks of the alleyway. The auras of the 3 brothers were rapidly rising. A narrow funnel-shaped spirit energy vortex appeared above their head. Spirit energy continuously surged into their bodies and transformed into their true energy. The sound of a membrane being broken rang out. The auras of the 3 barbarians of Ouyang directly rose by a large margin. In an instant they reached the peak of 5th grade Battle King. The onlookers became more and more astonished. Previously, the 3 brothers' cultivation levels were only at the initial stage of 5th grade Battle King, and their auras were even a little unstable. However, after drinking a cup of Frost Blaze Path Understanding brew, the 3 brothers' cultivation levels actually rose to the peak of 5th grade Battle King at the same time. Is this a joke? Do you think breaking through is as easy as eating and drinking? The crowd sucked in a breath of cold air. They knew that the 3 brothers' breakthroughs were definitely inseparable from the Frost Blaze Path Understanding brew. The few people in front did not break through because they passed out from a single cup. They simply did not have the time to adjust the rich spirit energy contained within the wine. However, they should be able to break through soon. This wine could actually help people break through. At this moment, the hearts of the remaining people were burning with passion. If they could break through to the next level, 500 crystals would not be a loss. The remaining 4 cups of wine were sold without much hesitation. When the 4th cup was sold, Bu Fang instantly covered the jar of white jade wine. There was still half a jar of wine left. There were a total of 3 jars of Frost Blaze Path Understanding brew. Bu Fang would not choose to brew this spirit wine in the future. It was not only because of the complicated process and the precious ingredients required. It was because the amount of energy needed to brew this spirit wine was too great. 3 jars of Frost Blaze Path Understanding brew were enough. Sold out, sold out. After the 3 barbarians of Ouyang completed their breakthroughs, the drunkenness on their faces disappeared. The 3 of them stepped into the store and were about to thank Bu Fang when they realized that no one was looking at them. Instead, they were looking at the outrageously beautiful woman sitting cross-legged on the ground. The woman's long hair fluttered under the wind of true energy. As the true energy surged, there seemed to be signs of a breakthrough. The 3 barbarians of Ouyang remembered that this woman was a 7th grade battle saint. Chapter 206. On the long street of the Imperial City, the hawkers on both sides of the street were hawking their wares, and there was an endless stream of pedestrians. A bald young monk wearing a black linen robe was carrying a basket of steaming buns, stuffing meat buns into his mouth as he walked. The white meat buns were steaming, but the young monk did not feel hot at all. He grabbed one with one hand and took a bite. Oil splashed everywhere, and the aroma of the meat buns permeated the air. As he walked, the basket of buns was quickly devoured by him. Casually tossing the basket of buns to the side of the street, the young monk wiped his oily mouth on his linen robe, then took out a gourd from his waist and poured wine into his mouth. Smacking his lips, his face was full of satisfaction. Only with wine and meat can life be called happy. The young monk grinned and walked toward Fong Fong's little store with big strides. Suddenly, he stopped in his tracks and solemnly looked toward the direction of the alleyway, because he sensed an extremely terrifying wave of true energy surging out from the direction of the store. He took another sip of wine, his face extremely solemn. Which insensitive 7th grade battle saint is training in such a big way in the Imperial City? The young monk grinned and laughed. Within the Imperial City, there were many 7th grade battle saints. Almost every 7th grade battle saint had their hands tied and did not dare to do anything too ostentatious. After all, it was a very risky time to stand out and be the first to stand out. Forget it, who cares if he is training to be a battle saint? My goal is just to gather some information. And at the same time to admire the legendary 5 Stripes Path Understanding tree. The young monk chuckled, rubbed his bald head, patted it lightly, and strode out. Bu Fang carried the white jade wine jar into the kitchen, hid the white jade wine jar, and turned to leave the kitchen. As soon as he left the kitchen, he saw a few familiar figures. Looking at these figures, Bufang was slightly taken aback. When Wu Yunbai saw Bufang, her eyes suddenly lit up. It was indeed this kid, she did not go the wrong way. However, Wu Yunbai did not move, because she saw a 7th-grade battle saint sitting cross-legged on the ground, seemingly in the midst of a breakthrough. A 7th-grade battle saint breaking through. This was no laughing matter. Da-da, the footsteps sounded again. 2 figures appeared at the door and stood behind Wu Yunbai. Ji Qingxue narrowed his eyes and looked at an Yan, who was sitting cross-legged in the store. His heart suddenly turned serious. Was this woman making a breakthrough? Breaking through at such a sensitive time. Lian Fu, on the other hand, was rather emotional as he looked at the store. Ever since the last time he came here with the old emperor, he had never been here again. Suddenly seeing the warm atmosphere of the store, he couldn't help but be reminded of the past. He couldn't help but pinch his thumb and middle finger together and cry a few times. And Yan's breakthrough did not last too long. Although her aura was rising, she did not break through the shackles of 7th-grade battle saint and step into the realm of 8th-grade war god. When the true energy in her body calmed down, Yan opened her eyes helplessly. She drank a cup of wine and heard the path understanding tune ringing in her ears, which almost made her enter a state of epiphany. Unfortunately, this state was too difficult, so Yan only improved a little from her original cultivation level of 7th-grade battle saint. It was still too difficult for her to step into the realm of 8th-grade war god. The true energy in the store dissipated. Yan stood up and stretched. At this moment, her perfect figure was completely outlined and attracted the attention of many people. It's a pity, Owner Bu. Although your wine is not bad, it's still lacking a little to help me break through. However, this little bit is like a heavenly moat that's hard to cross. Yan's voice carried a trace of regret, but fortunately, she wasn't too sad. Although she did not succeed in breaking through, her cultivation level still improve. Owner Bu, long time no see. How have you been? Is your business booming? Ji Qingxue laughed heartily and stepped into the store. He cupped his hands slightly toward Bufang. Bufang looked at Ji Qingxue in surprise. Why did this busy man have the time to visit his store today? Didn't this guy become an emperor? Business is not bad, Bufang replied calmly. Wu Yunbai looked at the young man who suddenly appeared and disrupted the rhythm of her meeting with Bufang. Although from their conversation, she could tell that they were old acquaintances. Owner Bu's restaurant is always filled with the aroma of food that makes people hungry. Ji Qingxue sighed. Suddenly, his tone changed and he said with a smile, Owner Bu, last night, you made a huge commotion when you brewed wine. The aroma of the wine enveloped half of the imperial city and shocked everyone. I wonder what kind of wine you brewed. Could you let this young master have a taste? Bufang glanced at Ji Qingxue and shook his head. He said, You are too late. Today's Frost Blaze Path Understanding brew has been sold out. There will be no more sales. You can only order something else. Sold out? Ji Qingxue was taken aback for a moment. Then, he rubbed his chin and nodded. How could Bufang's store's selling method be the same as other stores? It had been a long time since he went to Bufang's store to drink. He had almost forgotten about Bufang's style. Haha, this young master forgot. In that case, Owner Bu, please give me a serving of Ice Heart Jade Urn wine and a serving of red braised meat. In the entire imperial city, Owner Bu's red braised meat is the most delicious. Bufang nodded and turned around to enter the kitchen to start cooking. However, a voice rang out behind him, causing Bufang to turn his head. Wu Yunbai walked to a spot not far from Bufang. She frowned and said, Bufang, you didn't forget about me, did you? Bufang looked at Wu Yunbai's expressionless face, twitched the corner of his mouth and said, I didn't forget. I just didn't expect you to actually come. You still owe me the lotus seeds. I will definitely come. This is the key to whether I can break through or not. Wu Yunbai said in a serious tone. Bu Fong was stunned. The lotus seeds. At the thought of the lotus seeds, Bu Fong suddenly blinked and looked at Wu Yunbai in silence. Bu Fong's expression caused Wu Yunbai's expression to change drastically. Could it be that this guy had already wasted all the lotus seeds? That was a 7th grade spirit herb. How could it be wasted so casually? Suddenly, Wu Yunbai raised her fair and slender finger and pointed at Bu Fong while trembling. You didn't waste the lotus seeds, did you? Wasting doesn't count. I just used it, Bu Fong replied calmly. Looking at Wu Yunbai, Bu Fong thought of something else. It had already been a month. Why hadn't the Serpent Man arrived at the store? If the Serpent Man wanted to live, he would definitely come to his store to ask for the elixir cuisine. Could it be that there was an accident midway? Under normal circumstances, he should have arrived a long time ago. Since he hadn't shown up yet, there must have been an accident. Bu Fong sighed in his heart. How could you use the lotus seeds? What about my breakthrough? Where did you use the lotus seeds? Tell me quickly. Wu Yunbai was furious. It was not easy to get to the Imperial City, but this guy had already used the lotus seeds. I used them to brew wine. Not a single seed is left, Bu Fong said. Brew wine? Lotus seeds could be used to brew wine? Wait a minute. Wu Yunbai seemed to have thought of something and stared at Bu Fong with wide eyes. The wine this guy was talking about. Could it be the bar whose aroma covered half of the Imperial City last night? Using a 7th grade spirit herb to brew wine. Brother, can we not be so extravagant? Wu Yunbai's heart ached, so much so that she could barely breathe. What about the wine? Let me have a taste, maybe there's still some medicinal effects left, Wu Yunbai said with a mournful face, clinging to her last glimmer of hope. Oh, that wine has been sold out for today. Please come back tomorrow. Bu Fong looked at Wu Yunbai seriously and said. That serious look made Wu Yunbai want to kick him in the face. Outside the door, the sound of footsteps rose and fell again. Figures appeared one after another. The aura of a 7th grade battle saint had once again attracted the attention of the battle saints in the Imperial City. Therefore, these battle saints appeared in the store one after another to prevent the 5 stripes path understanding tree from being stolen. Chapter 207. There was definitely no more wine today. Wu Yunbai looked at Bu Fong with an aggrieved expression. However, no matter how aggrieved she was, it would be useless. There are still many delicious dishes in the store. You can have a taste. If you want to order anything, just tell this girl. In the end, Bu Fong even calmly patted Ouyang Xiaoyi's head and promoted the store's dishes. Then, he turned around and stepped into the kitchen. Ji Qingxue found a familiar spot near the 5 stripes path understanding tree and sat down. Fresh spirit energy floated around him, bringing with it some mysterious fluctuations. Ji Qingxue held his hands behind his back and slowly sized up the path understanding tree. His eyes were shining brightly. Outside the store, the spying gazes and auras had all retreated. Apparently, the battle saints had realized that this incident had nothing to do with the 5 stripes path understanding tree and left. The path understanding tree had yet to mature and bear fruit, so they did not want to get involved. Wu Yunbai ordered a few dishes. Although the prices of these dishes were staggering, as the young master of the White Cloud Villa, a mysterious faction that even the Celestial Arcanum sect feared, she still had enough crystals. Because she did not get any lotus seeds from Bu Fong, Wu Yunbai vented all her anger on these dishes. Anai Yen left with Yi Xiling. Anai Yen was in a hurry to return to the inn to consolidate her newly improved cultivation, while Yi Xiling was purely following Anai Yen. The store suddenly became a lot quieter. The people queuing up had all dispersed. The 3 barbarians of Ouyang also left eagerly. Having gotten a bargain, they were in a hurry to tell their fathers the good news. The rich aroma of the dishes quickly wafted out from the kitchen. This familiar aroma caused Ji Qingshue's gaze to shift away from the path understanding tree, and he felt a little emotional. Owner Bu's cooking is getting better and better. The aroma of the dishes is even more mesmerizing. Ji Qingxue took a deep breath and sighed. Lian Fu pinched his thumb and middle finger together as he sat to one side. His heart was still filled with nostalgia. This store once had the aura of the previous emperor. Although it had long dissipated, Lian Fu still felt an inexplicable sense of illusion and sadness. Reminiscing about the past, he pinched his thumb and middle finger again and started sobbing. Ji Qingxue looked at him helplessly. A rich meaty aroma quickly filled the air. Ouyang Xiaoi gracefully carried the red braised meat to Ji Qingxue's seat and placed the dish in front of him. Bufang also walked out of the kitchen, carrying a jar of ice-heart jade urn wine. Ji Qingxue's eyes lit up and he couldn't help but lick his lip. It had been a long time since he had drunk Owner Bu's wine and eaten Owner Bu's dishes. He was craving for them. It smells so good. Ji Qingxue moved his nose close to the red braised meat and took a deep breath. His face was filled with an intoxicated expression as he spoke. Bufang's red braised meat was extremely fragrant. Even Wu Yunbai, who was sitting far away with a belly full of anger, could not help but be attracted by it. He picked up a piece of rosy, lustrous, and fragrant red braised meat and stuffed it into his mouth. After chewing for a while, he felt the comfortable feeling of his teeth rubbing against the fresh and tender venison. He couldn't help but feel happy in his heart. After swallowing a mouthful of meat, he poured a cup of ice-heart jade urn wine and gulped it down. A comfortable feeling spread throughout his body. Bufang looked at Ji Qingxue's face filled with enjoyment. The corners of his mouth curled up and he returned to the kitchen to continue cooking. The bald young monk squinted his eyes and walked into the alleyway with a smile on his face. As he walked toward the store, he saw the big black dog lying at the entrance. The young monk's eyes immediately lit up and he licked his lip. What a fat dog! It must taste good. Blackie, who was taking a nap, suddenly felt a chill all over its body, as if a malicious gaze was staring at it. It couldn't help but open its doggy eyes and glance at the greedy looking at it, the monk. What the f***ck? What kind of gaze is that? Blackie's doggy eyes widened. This was the first time he saw someone looking at the Lord go as if he was looking at a delicious delicacy. Was this bald donkey trying to court death? The novice monk patted his bald head, and his expression changed, as if he was smiling. Red braised dog meat? That should be good. It's rare to find such a fat dog in the imperial city. But forget it, I should first complete that old fox Zhao Mushing's mission. The young monk smacked his lips and felt that it was a pity. He regretfully glanced at Blackie, shook his head, and stepped into the store. Blackie was dumbfounded. This bald donkey, is he trying to stir up trouble? What's with that regretful expression of yours? Blackie rolled its doggy eyes and went back to sleep. Meat, the aroma of meat. As soon as he stepped into the store, the young monk's eyes became even brighter. It was as if an egg was embedded with sparkling diamonds. There's wine, there's meat, this store is not bad. The young monk's gaze fell on Ji Qingxue, who was stuffing a juicy and fragrant piece of red braised meat into his mouth. He then looked at Wu Yunbai, who was taking a bite of an oily golden shumai. He couldn't help but gulp down a mouthful of saliva. The aroma that lingered in the store instantly lured out the gluttonous worm in his stomach. The satiety from eating a steamer of buns had also completely disappeared. Is this the place that old fox Zhao Mushing wanted me to complete the mission? The young monk couldn't help but smile. What would you like to eat? The menu is behind you. Tell me the name of the dish after you're done, Ouyang Xiaoi skillfully said to the strange monk who had just stepped into the store. The young monk was startled. He turned his head and saw the large pile of expensive dishes on the menu. The corner of his mouth suddenly twitched. Give this humble monk a serving of sweet and sour ribs and a jar of ice-heart jade urn wine, the young monk said to Ouyang Xiaoyi in a serious manner. Ouyang Xiaoyi was stunned. Could monks nowadays drink and eat meat so openly? What was up with this guy ordering wine and meat with a serious face? Sweet and sour ribs and ice-heart jade urn wine? Ouyang Xiaoyi asked in return. That's right, almsgiver. Wine and meat pass through the intestines. A monk shouldn't be restricted by the secular world. He should eat and drink as long as he has Buddha in his heart. The young monk put his palms together with a serious expression. All right, wait a moment. Ouyang Xiaoyi was stunned. Almsgiver, this humble monk has a small request. I would like to see the store's owner Bu, the young monk said with a smile. His face was full of kindness. You want to see the smelly boss? Wait a moment. He's not free right now. Ouyang Xiaoyi frowned. She felt that there was something strange about this monk. The young monk was not in a hurry. He found a seat and sat down. Ouyang Xiaoyi came to the kitchen window and reported the dishes the young monk had ordered to Bufang. This sweet and sour ribs and ice-heart jade urn wine were ordered by a monk. Ouyang Xiaoyi said curiously, and he said he wanted to see you. See me? Bufang was startled. He placed a dish on the window. After Ouyang Xiaoyi took it away, he placed it in front of Wu Yunbai. The two of them ordered a lot of dishes and ate happily, unable to stop. They didn't expect Bufang's dishes to taste so good. When Bufang walked out of the kitchen, he was holding a plate of fragrant sweet and sour ribs in one hand and a jar of ice-heart jade urn wine in the other as he approached the young monk. The young monk narrowed his eyes, glanced at Bufang, put his palms together, and sniffed. Your sweet and sour ribs and ice-heart jade urn wine, please enjoy, Bufang said calmly. After that, he calmly looked at the monk. The young monk stood up, his face full of smiles. I've long heard of Owner Bu's great name. I'm Shangda. I've admired Fong Fong's little store for a long time, so I've come to pay a visit today. Bufang didn't answer him. He was still looking at him expressionlessly. The young monk Shangda chuckled, touched his bald head, and lightly patted it. Owner Bu's cooking is quite good. This aroma is so tempting that I can't help myself. However, I'm here today because I have something to ask Owner Bu. Speak, Bufang said calmly. The young monk's expression suddenly became solemn. He put his palms together and slightly bowed toward Bufang. Monks are compassionate. On my way to the imperial city, I met a young serpent woman. Thinking that saving a life is better than building a 7-storied pagoda, I saved her. However, the young serpent woman was too heavily injured and fell into a deep coma. I was powerless. However, before the serpent woman fainted, she called out Owner Bu's name. Therefore, I'm here to ask if Owner Bu knows this serpent woman? Chapter 208. The young monk Shangda put his palms together. His face was filled with a benevolent and gentle smile. The smile on his face was almost piled up together as he stared straight at Bufang. However, his gaze was like a sharp sword, piercing the eyes. Snake-like woman? Bufang was stunned. Then, under the piercing gaze of the young monk, the corners of his mouth slowly curled up. I do, Bufang calmly replied. His expression did not change in the slightest. He was still wondering why the serpent men did not come looking for him. Turned out that they met with an accident on the way here. However, it was not strange for an accident to happen. The current imperial city was a gathering place. As a matter of fact, a group of experts had gathered at the entrance of the store last night. The serpent men were originally of a different race. For them to meet with an accident when they stepped into the territory of humans was completely normal. However, what was this monk trying to say? Bufang looked at the young monk Shangda with a puzzled gaze. And then? Do you need me to do anything? The young monk was delighted when he heard Bufang's confirmation. However, Bufang's question caused him to pause. He did not know how to answer Bu Fang's question. The one who captured the serpent men was that sly old fox, Zhao Musheng. If you really can't save them, then bring them here. Bu Fang glanced at the bald man, then turned around and returned to the kitchen. In the illusory spirit swamp, he had promised that if the serpent men came to his store, he would save them. However, this did not mean that if they met with an accident on the way here, Bu Fang would go looking for them. The young monk rubbed his head and grinned. Alright, this boss had a personality. However, he could not answer this question, so he would let Zhao Musheng worry about it. The bald young monk returned to his seat and looked at the sweet and sour ribs on the table. The tangerine sweet and sour ribs exuded hot steam and a rich meaty aroma, triggering the hunger in his stomach. He had already eaten a basket of buns on the way here, but now his stomach was extremely hungry again. He picked up his chopsticks, tapped them lightly on the table, and picked up a piece of orange-red sweet and sour ribs. The meat of the ribs was slightly tender, and when the chopsticks picked it up, it seemed to have a slight elasticity. Licking his lips, the young monk first used his tongue to lick the sauce on the ribs. The sweet and sour sauce instantly made the young monk's eyes light up. After stuffing the sweet and sour ribs into his mouth, the young monk's eyes immediately lit up. The rich meaty aroma burst forth in his mouth, and the bouncy meat knocked against the walls of his mouth. So delicious. The novice monk continued to chew. His eyes widened as he let out a strange laugh. This rib was really King delicious. Gulp. The young monk swallowed the ribs in one gulp. He smacked his lips, intoxicated by the fragrance of the meat in his mouth. As a meat-eating monk, he had an incomprehensible fondness for meat. He would eat almost any kind of meat. This was largely due to the fact that he had survived alone in a boundless desert. There were no plants or spirit fruits in that desert, only furry spirit beasts. In order to survive, he ate raw meat and drank blood. The taste of the spirit beast's meat was simply unflattering. After returning from that place, the young monk Shangde developed an obsession with meat. He swore to eat all the delicious meat in the world. He poured a cup of Iceheart jade urn wine. The wine was as clear as spring water and emitted a rich wine aroma, causing the young monk's nostrils to slightly expand. With a slurp, the wine entered his mouth, accompanied by the fragrance of meat, causing the young monk to involuntarily let out a soft moan. In the distance, Ouyang Xiaoyi widened her eyes as she stared at the bald monk who unscrupulously drank and ate meat. Her understanding of monks was completely overturned. Isn't it written in the books that monks don't drink or eat meat? Ouyang Xiaoyi curled her lips. Looking at the young monk Shangde, whose mouth was dripping with grease, he did not resemble the monks recorded in the books at all. As expected, the books were all lies. The young monk crossed his legs and placed them on the stool. One of his legs trembled as he picked up a piece of sweet and sour ribs and placed it in his mouth. The young monk seemed to sense Ouyang Xiaoyi's gaze and nodded at her with a face full of smiles. Ouyang Xiaoyi harumphed and turned her head away. Ji Qingxue finished his meal and put down his chopstick. His heart was filled with joy. It had been a long time since he had tasted Honorbu's delicacies. Today was the first time he had eaten his fill. Uncle Lien, let's go, Ji Qingxue said to Lien Fu, who had already finished a plate of egg-fried rice. Lien Fu raised his orchid fingers and lightly grunted. He stood up reluctantly. This store was filled with memories. As an emperor, he could not leave the imperial palace for too long. Ji Qingxue's visit today was only to find out what the Five Stripes Path Understanding Tree, which was coveted by many battle saints, looked like, as well as to taste Honorbu's new wine. Although he felt it was a pity that he did not get to taste it, he was quite satisfied to review Honorbu's craftsmanship. The two left. Wu Yunbai and Master Ah Wu were still working hard. The two ordered many dishes and ate happily. The Imperial Mausoleum. Light snow was gently falling. A gust of cold wind blew past, rustling the surroundings and making the rustling sound of tree leaves. The imperial mausoleum was located on top of a tall mountain. Due to the slight snowfall, the temperature was still much colder than the imperial city, which had already begun to warm up. From a thatched hut, a man wearing plain linen clothes slowly walked out. The man held a broom and slowly stepped into the eerie and majestic imperial mausoleum that was filled with many towering tombstones. Holding the broom, he slowly swept away the fallen leaves that had fallen on the tombstones. The rustling sound reverberated in the silent imperial mausoleum, carrying with it a somewhat horrifying sound. Tsk tsk. The dignified King Yu, who dared to fight for the throne in the imperial city, actually ended up in such a miserable state. Has the brilliance of the past all turned into flowing water? How sad and lamentable! Within the silent imperial mausoleum, a burst of sneering suddenly rang out and the crisp sound of footsteps echoed. The man who was holding the broom paused for a moment. He straightened his body and looked toward the person who was sneering. His eyes were incomparably lifeless and his face was expressionless. Zhao Rouge, who was wearing a white robe, was standing with his hands behind his back. Beside him were several guards wrapped in black robes whose faces could not be seen clearly. The aura of these guards was extremely powerful and frightening, suppressing all the guards in the imperial mausoleum. Zhao Rouge strode forward and paced back and forth at the entrance of the imperial mausoleum. He did not step into the imperial mausoleum. As an outsider, he did not have the qualifications or courage to enter the imperial mausoleum. That was because he simply did not know what the consequences would be if an outsider were to step into the imperial mausoleum. Ji Qingyu looked at Zhao Rouge for a while, then lowered his head again and began to sweep the leaves that had fallen on the tombstones. His movements were slow and overflowing with an air of seniority. He no longer had the demeanor of the energetic King Yu from before. "Your Highness, are you willing to stay in this imperial mausoleum for the rest of your life? Think about Ji Qingxue, who is currently sitting on the throne. Don't tell me you don't feel resentment and anger in your heart?" Zhao Rouge's gaze was like lightning as he coldly said, "Why is it that you, King Yu, are guarding the imperial mausoleum like a stray dog while Ji Qingxue is comfortably sitting on the throne? What gives him the right to do so?" Ji Qingyu's eyes flickered and a trace of a bitter smile appeared in his lifeless eyes. "Zhao Rouge, do you think the current me still has the ability to compete with Ji Qingxue? Everything is already a foregone conclusion. Imperial Father has chosen him, and I am a complete loser." "Loser? That's not how I remember King Yu." Zhao Rouge sneered. Ji Qingyu shook his head and no longer paid any attention to Zhao Rouge. He turned around and walked toward a tombstone. It was the tombstone of Emperor Changfeng. It was very simple and was not as magnificent as the tombstone of an emperor. One could even say it was a little shabby. Ji Qingyu lowered his head and hid his face as he slowly swept the fallen leaves. "Ji Qingyu, I, Zhao Rouge, have come here today to tell you that you still have a chance. Lian Fu is currently in the imperial city, and this is the best time for you to escape. If you don't want to leave, I, Zhao Rouge, will not say anything. However, if you still feel resentment in your heart, then I, Zhao Rouge, and my father, Zhao Mushing, will provide you with sufficient resources." Zhao Rouge asked, "What's your choice?" A cold wind blew past, blowing away the snow that filled the sky. When the snowflakes landed on Zhao Rouge's face, they were instantly melted by his body temperature. His gaze shifted toward a figure within the imperial mausoleum. He believed that Ji Qingyu would not admit defeat just like that. Sure enough, that figure slowly walked out with a broom in his hand. His eyes were still lifeless, but within this lifeless gray color, there was a flame that was reignited by the spring breeze. "Zhao Mushing, huh? That old fox is really annoying." Ji Qingyu lifted the broom and broke the velvet rope on his head, causing his hair to immediately spread out. Zhao Rouge looked at him and the corners of his mouth slightly curled up. It was late at night. 2 bright moons hung high in the sky, reflecting each other's radiance. In a courtyard within the imperial city, Zhao Mushing stood with his hands behind his back. His gaze was gentle and distant, and the energy on his body was fluctuating slightly like flowing water. Suddenly, a figure shrouded in the smell of alcohol landed in the courtyard. Occasionally, one could even hear the sound of drunken burp. Zhao Mushing's brows immediately furrowed as he looked at the figure. Shangde, you drank so much again. Monks are not supposed to drink, but you've gone from bad to worse. He, elder, Shangde knows that you understand. Why can't monks drink? As the saying goes, wine and meat pass through the intestines. What this monk wants is to feel good. Shangde's face was flushed red as he said to Zhao Mushing, his breath reeking of alcohol. All right, no matter how much you drink, as long as you don't cause any trouble, it's fine. Zhao Mushing frowned and sighed. If it were any other monk from the Mahayana island who appeared in front of him like this, he would have long given them a slap, but Shangde sighed. Elder, I've found out about the matter you asked me to investigate. That owner Bu, he said that he knows this serpent man. Shangde's eyes were blurry from drunkenness, and he couldn't even stand steadily. He leaned against a tree and said, That owner Bu said? So what if we know each other? What should we do? The muscles on Zhao Mushing's face twitched slightly as he chuckled. So what if we know each other? Since we know each other, it'll be easy. Bu Feng, oh Bu Feng, this old man wants to see if you'll leave me in the lurch. Ha! Chapter 209. On the long street of the imperial city, in a secluded alley. A gentle light flickered in the pitch-black alley. Blackie was quietly lying in front of Fong Fong's little store, breathing evenly and sleeping soundly. The store's doors were tightly shut. From the kitchen, the crisp and rhythmic sound of a kitchen knife colliding with a chopping board could be heard. Thud, 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 the sound was crisp and pleasant. Bu Feng's slender fingers were slightly wet as he held the kitchen knife and rhythmically cut the radish on the chopping board. The speed at which the kitchen knife moved was extremely fast, almost dazzling to the eyes. However, Bu Feng was methodical and his expression did not change. It was obvious that this level of speed was not considered fast for him. Finally, when the last piece of radish was cut, Bu Feng wrapped his fingers around the handle of the knife and slightly waved it. The kitchen knife began to spin along his fingers like a windmill. Then, Bu Feng flicked his wrist and the kitchen knife was perfectly inserted into the knife holder. After stretching his back, Bu Feng slightly opened his mouth and yawned. He would practice his cutting and carving techniques whenever he was free. As a chef who wanted to stand at the top of the food chain in the fantasy world, he could not slack off in the slightest. He had to earnestly practice the basics of being a chef at all times. Wiping away the water on his hands, Bu Feng's calm eyes were suddenly filled with excitement. His mind sank into the system. The abrupt mission is completed and the reward has been issued. The reward seems to be dragon blood rice and a 10% increase in true energy cultivation progress. Not bad. Bu Feng smacked his lips and was somewhat elated. His current cultivation progress was not slow. At least, compared to those who were cultivating, his breakthrough speed was like flying. However, Bu Feng did not care about his cultivation level because of his battle prowess. The reason he broke through his cultivation level was so that he could have a more stable supply of true energy to cook those true energy dishes. Even though he was currently a 5th-grade battle king, his true energy was almost depleted after cooking many true energy dishes. This was very troublesome for him. Moreover, with his current cultivation, he couldn't use the golden dragon bone kitchen knife for too long. If the next time he went to capture ingredients, the golden dragon bone kitchen knife would turn into a black lump kitchen knife due to the lack of true energy halfway. That scene. Bu Feng felt embarrassed just thinking about it. The system's reward had been released. The corner of Bu Feng's mouth twitched slightly. Following the system's instructions, he squatted down, opened the cupboard below, and took out a ceramic jar. The jar was a little heavy, which surprised Bufang. It was filled with dragon blood rice. After placing the lid on the table, Bufang opened the lid of the ceramic jar. A slightly pungent aroma of rice wafted out. This aroma was not unpleasant, and it even made one want to take a deep breath. Bufang's eyes lit up when he saw the plump rice in the ceramic jar. The color of the rice was red. At first glance, it looked dark and gloomy. However, after looking at it for a long time, one would notice that the rice seemed to be emitting a bewitching blood-red light. Is this the dragon blood rice? It seems to be something. Bufang pursed his lips, reached out 2 fingers, picked up a grain of rice, and brought it closer to take a closer look. Dragon blood rice, semi-dragon, is made from the blood of a 7th-grade semi-dragon spirit beast. It has been soaked in the blood essence of the semi-dragon and absorbed its blood essence. After growing in a difficult environment, the rice grains are plump, dark red in color, and full of rich essence and spiritual energy. It's a rare ingredient, the system introduced in a serious and solemn voice. After hearing this, Bufang was taken aback. He couldn't help but feel a little regretful. He didn't expect that the dragon blood rice was not watered by the blood of a true dragon, but by the blood of a flood dragon. This made the quality of the rice much lower. However, Bufang didn't dwell too much on it. Currently, the highest ingredient provided by the system was around the 7th grade. Perhaps it was because of his limited strength. When his cultivation base broke through, he might be able to get better ingredient. Bufang rubbed his chin, looking at the jar of dragon blood rice. The system didn't provide the latest recipe for dragon blood rice, so Bufang had to figure out how to cook dragon blood rice by himself. He grabbed a handful of dragon blood rice, and the rice grains slipped through his fingers, falling into the ceramic jar. Feeling the spirit energy and essence energy flowing in his palm, Bufang's mouth twitched, and he had a plan in his mind. There were many ways to cook rice. For example, egg-fried rice was the most basic rice cuisine. Egg-fried rice wasn't difficult, but it wasn't easy either. For many chefs, it was an entry-level dish, and they could learn it in a few days. However, to cook it well, it was very difficult. However, Bufang didn't intend to use dragon blood rice to cook egg-fried rice. It wasn't because egg-fried rice wasn't good, but because Bufang couldn't find an egg worthy of this dragon blood rice. In cooking egg-fried rice, the importance of the rice was self-evident, but the importance of the egg couldn't be neglected either. He first poured out half of the dragon blood rice from the ceramic jar into a porcelain bowl, then poured in the Heaven Mountain spring water that was brimming with spirit energy, and began to wash the rice. After digging for a while, the color of the rice gradually seeped out a faint red. Every grain of dragon blood rice was stained with luster, plump and plump. He poured this rice washing water into the flower pot of the 5 stripes path understanding tree that was working hard to give it some nourishment. Bufang returned to the kitchen, poured the dragon blood rice into a steamer, put it into the iron pot on the stove, and began to steam it. During the steaming process, Bufang began to cook other dishes. Taking out a piece of fatty wandering dragon cow meat, green smoke curled around Bufang's hand and the dragon bone kitchen knife appeared. With a flourish of the knife, the wandering dragon cow meat was completely diced. He lit the fire, heated the wok, poured in oil, added some seasoning ingredients, and stir-fried for a while. A pungent aroma surged out. Pouring the wandering dragon cow meat into the wok, Bufang suddenly poured out his true energy, covering the iron wok. Then, he began to stir-fry. Flames surged up, and with a shake of the wok, oil splashed everywhere. The sound of the spatula colliding with the iron wok reverberated throughout the entire store. Not long after, the rich aroma of beef wafted out, lingering above the entire store. Pouring the thickened sauce into the wok, the ruddy wandering dragon cow meat immediately trembled in the wok, the thick and fragrant sauce bubbling. Covering the wok, Bufang allowed the wandering dragon cow meat to simmer for a while. During this time, Bufang found a circular plate and took out a white radish. Twirling the dragon bone kitchen knife in his hand, he waved it at the white radish. Not long after, an exquisite radish flower appeared. For the current Bufang, carving a flower was really not a difficult task. Placing the flower on the plate, Bufang carried the plate to the steamer, which was already emitting a rich aroma of rice. Opening the steamer, steam rose up, and a rich essence, energy and aroma spread out. Bufang took in a deep breath, a little intoxicated. This rice aroma had a hint of sweet and refreshing sweetness. He scooped up a big spoonful of dragon blood rice and covered the plate. The semicircular dragon blood rice emitted a ruddy luster, full and fragrant, teasing one's taste buds and appetite. Closing the steamer, Bufang returned to the front of the wok. Gurgling sounds continuously came from the wok, and the fragrance of meat continuously seeped out. Stopping the fire, opening the wok, steam surged up, like an aroma bomb bursting forth. Inside the wok, the thick sauce slowly flowed along with the bursting bubbles. The sparkling and fragrant wandering dragon cow meat was glistening with a splendor. Bufang skillfully shook the wok, scooped out the wandering dragon cow meat with a ladle, and slowly poured it around the fragrant dragon blood rice. The combination of the two fragrances made it even more difficult for one to control themselves. He scooped out the thick sauce and poured it over the dragon blood rice and the wandering dragon cow meat. The thick sauce flowed, steaming hot. Under the light, the thick sauce seemed to be emitting light. The wandering dragon cow meat in the sauce slightly trembled under the heat. The sauce seeped into the cracks of the dragon blood rice and began to loosen the rice, allowing the fragrance contained within to gradually be released. Bufang snapped his fingers, and the corners of his mouth curled up. This simple yet not simple dish was completed. Dragon blood meat donburi done. Chapter 210. The Imperial Palace, the Main Hall. Ji Qingxue was wearing a dragon robe with his hands clasped behind his back. There was a slight smile on his face as he narrowed his eyes and strolled through the main hall. He was currently in a very good mood. After such a long time, he was finally able to taste Honorbu's dishes. His appetite was satisfied and his mood was naturally much better. His entire body seemed to be floating as he walked. Many of the eunuchs in the main hall could not help but cover their mouths and chuckle as they watched Ji Qingxue constantly pacing around the main hall. Occasionally, he would even jump in joy. Ji Qingxue was now the emperor. Ever since he ascended to the throne, the impression he gave people was that of an incomparably dignified and energetic appearance. Nowadays, it was rare to see him like this. The eunuchs naturally found it amusing and covered their mouth. After taking a few steps, Ji Qingxue felt that the gazes around him were a little off. He raised his eyebrows and looked around at the group of eunuchs who were covering their mouths and blushing. He was slightly taken aback and realized that his actions just now must have caused these eunuchs to laugh. With a slightly embarrassed expression, Ji Qingxue lightly coughed and sternly said with a straight face, "What are you laughing at? Have you never seen my after-meal exercise?" When the eunuchs heard this, they immediately lowered their heads even more and chuckled one after another. Even Ji Qingxue himself could not help but chuckle. He was indeed in a good mood tonight. Ji Qingxue walked to the front of the dragon throne, lightly fluttering the hem of his dragon robe as he calmly sat down on the throne. Suddenly, from outside the main hall, a figure quickly flew in and knelt in front of Ji Qingxue. Ji Qingxue was slightly taken aback and lightly coughed. "Reporting, Your Majesty, there is an incident in the Imperial Mausoleum. Ji Qingyu has been taken away and his whereabouts are currently unknown." The person kneeling in front of the main hall solemnly reported the incident. "What?" The joy on Ji Qingxue's face instantly disappeared. Ji Qingyu was banished to the Imperial Mausoleum by Emperor Chongfeng. Did he dare to escape without permission? But his cultivation was also sealed, so he should not have the ability to escape at all. At this moment, Lien Fu also walked out from behind the main hall. His face was solemn as he pinched his thumb and middle finger and twisted his waist. I have only been gone for a few days and King Yu has already been taken away? Could it be that someone planned this? Lien Fu frowned and said. Ji Qingshue's brows were almost knitted into a knot, and he suddenly felt a little annoyed. Ji Qingyu's identity was very sensitive. He had been living well in the imperial mausoleum, but because of what happened in the imperial capital, he brought Lien Fu here. He did not expect such a thing to happen. Leaving the imperial mausoleum is the same as disobeying the decree of the late emperor. I originally thought King Yu was already disheartened, but I didn't expect him to still have the courage to leave. The next time I meet King Yu, I will definitely bring him to justice in order to respect the dignity of the late emperor. Lien Fu flicked his sleeves and pinched his thumb and middle finger together. His sharp voice contained a hint of anger. Ji Qingxue lightly sighed. After escaping from the imperial mausoleum, could it be that King Yu was planning to make a comeback? There was still a seal placed on his body by Emperor Chongfeng in his dragon soul state. An ordinary 7th-grade battle saint would not be able to break it. Without cultivation, what was the use of a mere mortal like him? Ji Qingxue pinched his fingers. His gaze became somewhat indifferent as he softly murmured, Originally, I had spared your life because of Imperial Father. I hoped that you wouldn't do anything foolish. Bu Fong carried the round plate out of the kitchen and placed the dish on the dining table. After washing his hands, he sat down on a chair full of anticipation. The round plate was rather large and contained the dragon blood rice donburi. The dragon blood meat donburi was made using dragon blood rice and the loin meat of the 7th-grade spirit beast, wandering dragon cow. Just this ingredient alone was enough to make one unable to ignore it. Boiling hot air surged up violently. It was thick and did not disperse, carrying with it a rich aroma of meat and rice. Bu Fong picked up a blue and white porcelain spoon and scooped up a spoonful of dragon blood rice. Each grain of rice was plump and firm. Due to the surging hot air, there seemed to be some water on the surface. The red rice was extremely eye-catching. Even though this dragon blood rice was grown from being soaked in dragon blood, it did not have the fishy smell of dragon blood. Instead, it had the fragrance of white rice. That kind of fragrance was like milk that slowly flowed into one's heart, causing one's heart to involuntarily feel a little sweetness. After putting this spoonful of dragon blood rice into his mouth, Bu Fong's eyebrows immediately twitched. After chewing lightly, the grains of dragon blood rice in his mouth were clearly separated and chaotically moved between his teeth and tongue. The dragon blood rice was slightly harder than ordinary rice and was more chewy. When it bounced off the walls of one's mouth, it gave one a special feeling. Once it entered Bu Fong's mouth, a rich spiritual essence instantly erupted. It surged up from his mouth and washed over his entire body. Even though this spiritual essence could not compare to the spiritual essence of the black swamp boa, it was still not bad. He scooped up another spoonful of soup made from the wandering dragon cow and poured the boiling soup into his mouth. The steaming soup mixed with the dragon blood rice in his mouth. The chewy wandering dragon cow meat also swam in the soup, causing Bu Fong's entire body to tremble. As he lightly exhaled hot air, Bu Fong's mouth was trembling. It was truly too hot. However, this scalding sensation was the most enjoyable part of eating donburi. The scorching heat in one's mouth made one unable to stop. The rich fragrance spread in one's mouth, and the feeling of wanting to swallow yet not daring to do so was simply exhilarating. At this moment, Bu Fong was experiencing this exhilarating sensation, a mixture of pain and happiness. As he swallowed the steaming soup mixed with the dragon blood rice in his mouth, the soothing sensation caused all the pores on his body to slightly open up. This feels good. Bu Fong lightly exhaled a breath of hot air. The feeling of being relieved of a heavy burden after swallowing a steaming hot donburi was always present. He licked his lips. His tongue was slightly numb from the scalding sensation. Actually, the taste of this wandering dragon cow meat soup would be even better with a little chili, Bufang mumbled as he chewed on the porcelain spoon in his mouth. However, Bufang was actually not very fond of chili. Many of the dishes he cooked were not very spicy, but chili was a very good seasoning. In the future, I'll just adjust it according to the taste of the customers. Bufang pursed his lips. He had chili, and the abyssal chili sauce was still stored in his system storage. Without thinking about it, Bufang wholeheartedly began to enjoy the dragon blood donburi. He ate happily, covering his mouth from time to exhale hot air. His appearance was indeed painful and happy at the same time. However, in front of the delicacy, he could not control himself. By the time he finished the entire bowl of donburi, fine beads of sweat had appeared on his forehead. Rubbing his slightly bulging stomach, Bufang curled up on the chair. He was so lazy that he did not want to move at all. After calming down for a while, Bufang finally stood up, cleaned the table, and returned to the kitchen. This could be considered as a new dish, one that Bufang quite liked. Dragon blood donburi was both nutritious and delicious. After tidying up everything, Bufang stretched his back, yawned, and returned upstairs. After taking a comfortable hot bath, he lay down on his bed and closed his eyes. After eating and drinking to his heart's content, he would have a good night's sleep. In the early morning, the morning star leaped out and excitedly emitted a radiance from its body, sprinkling its gentle light over the land. The door of Fong Fong's little store, which was located in the alleyway, was also opened, revealing a sleepy Bufang. His slender fingers were holding onto a porcelain plate, and within the porcelain plate was the fragrant sweet and sour ribs. Placing the sweet and sour ribs in front of Blackie, Bufang rubbed Blackie's head and yawned. He pulled out a chair and curled up on it, feeling the slightly cold air. On both sides of the imperial city's long street, there were already morning market vendors hawking their wares. A group of people dressed in black, carrying a sedan chair, stopped at the entrance of the alleyway. A figure walked toward the sedan chair. This figure's face was covered with a black cloth, and he was dressed in a black warrior's robe. It was obvious that he was trying to hide his identity. However, that shiny head and the few scars on it, well, if this guy was standing in front of Bufang, Bufang would definitely recognize him. The young monk pulled open the curtain of the sedan chair and single-handedly pulled out a figure. To hell with Zhao Mushing. Instead of letting this little monk have a good night's sleep early in the morning, he actually made this little monk do such a low-level, unskilled thing. The young monk cursed as he took a few steps forward and flung the figure to the ground. He glanced at the figure, stepped on the long and narrow tail of the serpent, bent down and said, "Serpent man, listen up. If you want to save your companion, then go look for Owner Boo. Don't blame this little monk for not reminding you." Anai, who was struggling to get up from the ground, angrily glared at the baldy. "Go early or else you'll have to line up." The young monk rubbed his head and laughed carefreely. He led the sedan chair bearers away. Only the serpent man Anai was left on the ground, gnashing his teeth in anger. Chapter 211. Anai curled up his serpent tail and straightened his body. His upper body was covered with hideous wounds. Damned bastards! Ani's eyes were burning with anger, but his heart was filled with sorrow. Only after leaving the illusory spirit swamp did he realize how big this world was. In the Serpent Men tribe, his cultivation level of 6th grade Battle Emperor was already very high. Basically, no one dared to provoke him. He could even easily kill some of the spirit beasts in the vicinity. However, as soon as he stepped into the human kingdom, he was horribly injured. The human world was indeed more terrifying than the illusory spirit swamp. The tribe elder's words were indeed reasonable. The group of people detained Yu Fu and Serpent Man Yu Feng, but left him here. They must be plotting something. Do you want me to go find the senior? This group of people must have set up an ambush. If senior is benevolent enough to save Yu Fu, you will definitely fall into their trap. I can't harm senior. Anai clenched his fists and his expression was dark and gloomy. But if he didn't go, Yu Fu and Uncle Yu Feng would be in danger. It was a difficult choice. A serpent man? Suddenly, just as Anai was hesitating, a puzzled voice rang out from behind him. Anai was taken aback. He turned around and saw two familiar figures. He clearly remembered these two figures. They were also in the tribe, coming for the Ice Soul Monarch Lotus, although they didn't get it in the end. I thought you guys arrived a long time ago. So you've only just arrived? But why are you alone? If I remember correctly, the person who needs treatment from Owner Bu isn't you. Wu Yunbai, dressed in a white robe, looked at the wounded Anai in amazement and asked calmly. Ani's eyes moved slightly. He wasn't sure if this Wu Yunbai was trustworthy. Let's go. We'll talk in Owner Bu's store. Wu Yunbai saw that Anai seemed to have a lot of difficulties. She frowned and led the way. Master Ah Wu glanced at Anai and walked forward with his head held high. The three of them arrived at Bufang's store. Wu Yunbai had purposely come early today. She was furious that she did not get to taste the Frost Blaze Path Understanding brew brewed with lotus seed. Early in the morning, she dragged Master Ah Wu, who was still snoring, away. Bufang was curled up on a chair at the door. When he saw the three of them approaching, his eyes flickered. When he saw the serpent person that he had not seen for a long time, he was immediately astonished. Yesterday, the young monk came to his store and mentioned about the serpent person. Why did the serpent person personally appear today? That novice monk from yesterday was indeed problematic. Owner Bu, do you still remember this Naga? Wu Yunbai arrived at the entrance of the store. She first glanced at the big black dog that was lying at the side eating the sweet and sour ribs, then said to Bufang. Master Ah Wu's eyes were already glued to the meat. This sweet and sour ribs, which was worth dozens of crystals, was just casually eaten by a dog. What a reckless waste. Blackus stopped chewing on the sweet and sour ribs. It raised its head slightly and glanced at Master Ah Wu, who was staring at it dumbfoundedly. It snorted, turned its body, and aimed its butt at Master Ah Wu. It continued chewing on the meat on the porcelain plate, wagging its tail in a rather adorable manner. Senior, when Anai saw Bufang, his heart was filled with sorrow. Finally, he saw a living human. It had been a month. He came out of the illusory spirit swamp just to see Bufang. Now that he had finally seen him, his heart was filled with mixed feelings. Looking at Anai, who was crying and snot at the same time, Bufang's eyes twitched. Brother, do you have to be so emotional? Come in first, Bufang said. He left the chair and walked into the store. Wu Yunbai took a deep breath and strode into the store. As soon as she stepped into the store, her expression changed slightly. Because the spirit energy in the store had become denser than yesterday, and the mysterious fluctuations were very obvious. It was as if there was a strange path-understanding melody ringing in her ears at every moment. This path-understanding tree. Wu Yunbai's eyes focused on the 5 stripes path-understanding tree in the earthy yellow flower pot in the corner. The leaves on the path-understanding tree had become luxuriant, no longer fresh and tender. It was obvious that the path-understanding tree was beginning to mature. Master Ah Wu was the most affected. After all, he was a 7th-grade battle saint, and could clearly sense the path-understanding melody emanating from the path-understanding tree. At this moment, he seemed to have a feeling that he wanted to sit down and cultivate. After all, it was too difficult to find a mature 5 stripes path-understanding tree. Miss, it looks like this path-understanding tree is about to mature. Owner Bu's flower pot is strange. It should have the effect of accelerating time. Otherwise, it would be impossible for the path-understanding tree to grow so fast, Master Ah Wu solemnly said. As a 7th-grade battle saint, he was the clearest about the current situation in the Imperial City. Once the 5 stripes path-understanding tree matured, the strange balance that had always existed in the Imperial City would be broken. You two go and see what dishes you want to order. That serpent man, where are the others? Just you alone? Bufang turned around and said. Ani's heart trembled when he heard Bufang's words. He was hesitant because he felt that the Baldy was definitely plotting something. He had asked him to appear here to lure the senior into a trap. He could not harm the senior. Ani struggled in his heart. Say it, don't be afraid. There are many things that I would not agree to under normal circumstances. Just say it. Bufang was calm. He could see the struggle in Ani's eyes, and it was obvious that he had his own difficulties. Would not agree. Wu Yunbai was speechless at Bufang's words. Indeed, owner Bu could be inflexible at times. If he had sold her a cup of Frost Blaze Path Understanding brew yesterday, she would not have needed to come so early today. Serpent Man Ani's heart immediately relaxed. He clenched his teeth and spilled the beans. Wu Yunbai and Master Ah Wu listened with great interest. The adventures of the Serpent Men were really exciting and rich. It was much more interesting than their boring journey. Zhao Musheng. Bufang glanced at the Serpent Man and asked calmly. Yes, that damned guy is called Zhao Musheng. He was the one who kidnapped us. Anai clenched his teeth, full of resentment. Bufang thought for a moment and remembered the guy who resisted his divine dragon silhouette in the double calamity dragon head array. He did not expect this guy to come back again, and this time, his target was him. Senior, that Zhao Musheng must have dug a trap for you to jump into. Don't put yourself in danger because of us. We will feel bad if you do. From a moral point of view, I really don't want Senior to go rescue them. But Yu Fu and Uncle Yu Feng are my family. Ani's face was full of struggle and he said a lot. Bufang was dumbfounded. He was speechless as he looked at this chattering fellow. He raised his hand and interrupted the incessant Ani. He said calmly that, let me interrupt a little. I didn't say I was going to rescue them. Ani was dumbfounded. Wu Yunbai was also stunned. She looked at Bufang. I am only responsible for rescuing your Uncle Yu Feng. As for what happened on the way to the store, it has nothing to do with me, Bufang said seriously. Ani's whole body trembled. If Bufang did not rescue them, then Yu Fu and Uncle Yu Feng would not be able to be rescued. Just as Ani was about to say something, footsteps came from outside the alleyway. Another group of people squeezed into the store. Here, as you can see, my store is very busy. Rescuing people. I don't have time. Bufang spread out his hands, glanced at Ani and then at Wu Yunbai. You can ask her for help. After all, you are all from the illusory spirit swamp. Even though you are from different races, you might have been from the same family thousands of years ago. You were from the same family thousands of years ago. Wu Yunbai did not know whether to laugh or cry. However, Wu Yunbai looked at the despairing Ani and sighed. Serpent Man, since we are from the same family, since we are more familiar with each other, how about we help you rescue them? But there is a price to pay for us to help. We hope that after we return to the illusory spirit swamp, you can introduce us to the Serpentine Sovereign. Suddenly, Wu Yunbai's eyes shone brightly as she stared at Ani. Chapter 212. Miss, you can't. Master Ah Wu's eyes nearly popped out of their sockets when he heard Wu Yunbai's words. Oh my miss, why are you getting involved in this? Now that the imperial capital is in danger, if we end up becoming the bird that sticks out in the eyes of all the battle saints, then that would be terrible. Although the White Cloud Villa is strong, there are only the two of us in the imperial city of the Light Wind Empire. Wu Yunbai acted as if she hadn't heard Master Ah Wu at all. Her eyes were fixed on Anai. The Serpentine Sovereign, the insufferably arrogant Serpentine Sovereign, the legendary figure who single-handedly led the Serpent Men tribe to establish a vast city that rivaled the White Cloud Villa. Wu Yunbai had grown up reading the Serpentine Sovereign's biographies from the White Cloud Villa. Although she didn't know which generation the current Serpentine Sovereign was, it didn't stop her from looking forward to meeting him. Anai was dumbfounded. He couldn't wrap his head around the situation. What was up with this human? Why were you so fanatical about the Serpentine Sovereign? Could it be that we really were a family thousands of years ago? Anai was horrified. I grew up listening to the legends of the Serpentine Sovereign. I just wanted to see what the legendary Serpentine Sovereign looked like. He was actually able to severely injure my insufferably arrogant father, and it took him 3 years to recover. The excitement on Wu Yunbai's face faded. She glanced at Anai and said calmly, this seems to be turning into a sad story. Is it because the Serpentine Sovereign injured your father that you're fanatical about the Serpentine Sovereign? Anai felt his brain was in a mess. Just tell me if you want to introduce me. Wu Yunbai crossed her arms and raised her chin. Introduce me. If you can really save Yu Fu and Uncle Yufeng, I'll beg the Great Elder to introduce you even if I have to kowtow until my head bleeds. Anai said through gritted teeth. The Serpent Men tribe had an audience with the Serpentine Sovereign once a year. This was a rare opportunity. Then it's a deal. Wu Yunbai was satisfied. She smiled and snapped her fingers. Master Ah Wu cried behind her. Miss, can we not be so willful? If you want to see the Serpentine Sovereign, just go back to the villa and ask the Villa Lord to bring you there. Owner Bu, you should have the Frost Blaze Path Understanding brew today, right? Give me a cup. Wu Yunbai was very happy now. She waved her hand casually and was very generous. Young mistress, let's think about it, Master Ah Wu said. However, Wu Yunbai ignored him and looked at Bufang. Bufang expressionlessly nodded, then turned around and stepped into the kitchen. As soon as he entered the kitchen, the sound of footsteps could be heard from outside the door. Several figures squeezed into the store. The first to bear the brunt was the Ouyang family. Evidently, the breakthrough of the 3 barbarians of Ouyang yesterday had shocked them, and they hurriedly rushed over this morning. Ouyang Xiaoi stuck her head out and looked at the kitchen. At this time, Owner Bu was not in the store, so he could only be in the kitchen. What do you want to order? Let me know now. Ouyang Xiaoi skillfully started her job of maintaining order in the store. Today, the store's Frost Blaze Path Understanding brew is limited to 5 cups. Bufang's indifferent voice drifted out from the kitchen. Then, Bufang walked out with a white jade wine jar in his arms. His expression was incomparably calm. Even though the crowd was dissatisfied with the reduced quantity of the wine, they did not say anything. This was a wine that could help one achieve a breakthrough. The rarer something is, the greater its value. This was normal. Bufang placed the white jade wine jar on the table and removed the clay seal. There was still about a third of the wine left in the white jade wine jar. A rich wine aroma immediately wafted out from the wine jar, causing everyone to be intoxicated by it. Early in the morning, the fragrance of wine wafted out from the alleyway and lingered around the alleyway. Splash! Bufang used a bamboo tube to scoop up a cup of light green wine. Cloud patterns hovered around the cup and the rich spirit energy faintly trembled. Here's your Frost Blaze Path Understanding brew. Please enjoy, Bufang said as he handed the cup to the impatient Wu Yunbai. Wu Yunbai took the wine and her eyes could no longer tear away from the wine. She stuck out her tongue and licked her rosy lip. With a gulp, she swallowed a mouthful of saliva and took a sip of the wine. A fiery, spicy taste instantly rushed into her mouth, causing her entire body to tremble. Her eyes brightened as she raised her head and took 3 small gulps. 3 gulping sounds could be heard from her smooth neck as she finished the cup of wine. Bufang timely caught the cup that Wu Yunbai tossed over in a daze and looked at the latter calmly. Wu Yunbai's entire face turned pink and the 2 red streaks on her cheeks made her look even more adorable. With a light burp, Wu Yunbai staggered a step forward. Her head was spinning and she fell to the ground with a thud. "Miss!" Master Ah Wu was shocked and quickly helped Wu Yunbai up. However, the latter was already dead drunk. A cup of Frost Blaze Path Understanding brew was terrifyingly strong. Passing out after 1 cup was no joke. Owner Bu. My apologies. Here are 500 crystals. I'll take my leave first. Master Ah Wu was somewhat speechless. He had just said he was going to save someone and now he was going to pass out after 1 cup. Miss, are you here to make a joke? Bufang nodded as he accepted the crystals. Master Ah Wu did not say anything. He supported Wu Yunbai out of the store and called the bewildered Anai to follow. The 3 of them quickly disappeared from the store. Bufang knocked on the white jade wine jar with the bamboo tube to draw everyone's attention back. He said calmly, "There are 4 cups left." Instantly, everyone's faces lit up with excitement and the sound of scrambling arose once more. After selling the remaining 4 cups of Frost Blaze Path Understanding brew, Bufang put away the white jade wine jar and carried it back to the kitchen, putting it away. After selling the wine, the store returned to its usual business mode. The Ouyang family members carried Elder Ouyang, who had passed out after 1 cup, out of the store. Xiao Xiaolong also carried Xiaoyu, who was lying on the floor and smacking his lips, out of the store. What a pity! There's a new dish today. Nobody wants to try it, Bufang muttered to himself as he looked at the departing figures. Owner Bu, why has the store been so busy in the mornings lately? We can't even squeeze in if we come early. The pot-bellied Fatty Jean walked in with his army of fatties. Fatty Jean spoke in a carefree manner. It was once again the ordinary and warm business hours. Xiaoyi, serve the dishes. Sigh. Wu Yunbai was lying motionlessly on the bed like an octopus. Suddenly, her whole body trembled and she pulled around randomly, messing up the bedsheet. She crawled up from the bed with a pout and a myriad of expressions on her face. She rubbed her aching head and glanced at the darkening night sky outside the window. Her eyes suddenly narrowed. She lightly exhaled a breath that was filled with the strong smell of alcohol. Wu Yunbai was taken aback for a moment and then hurriedly looked within herself. She did not even have time to feel if the Frost Blaze Path Understanding brew brewed with the seeds of the monarch lotus had helped her achieve a breakthrough. This. Oh my God! Wu Yunbai was dumbfounded. Within her dantian, there was a lake of swirling spiritual energy that was constantly dispersing true energy. If her true energy cyclone was said to be a small pond yesterday, then it had turned into a huge lake today. Cup of wine actually helped her achieve a breakthrough while she was asleep. The true energy cyclone was like a lake, and when it revolved, it set off monstrous waves. This meant that she had stepped into the realm of 7th grade battle saint. Wu Yunbai's eyes slightly widened and her rosy lips suddenly broke into a smile. She stood where she was, and with a single thought, she felt a gust of air gushing out from beneath her feet. Her whole body slowly rose into the air, treading on the air and taking a few crooked steps. Wu Yunbai was beyond excited. Walking in the air was something only a 7th grade battle saint could achieve. I really did achieve a breakthrough. Furthermore, it was done without a sound. Even though it has a lot to do with my previous accumulation, Owner Bu's wine is really miraculous. I was worried that I would miss the best opportunity to achieve a breakthrough because I was drunk. Who would have thought that I would directly achieve a breakthrough? Wu Yunbai excitedly clenched her small fists and couldn't help but laugh in her heart. She walked out of her room and saw Master Ah Wu sprawled on the side, snoring away without a care for his image. The serpent man An was also squinting with his snake tail coiled. Wu Yunbai saw this scene and narrowed her eyes. A trace of gentleness flashed across her eyes. Then, she opened her mouth and roared. Master Ah Wu! Master Ah Wu was immediately startled. His eyes were still drowsy. The serpent man on eye also opened his eyes and looked at Wu Yunbai in confusion. Come, let's go save them. This lady's broadsword has long been thirsty for it. Wu Yunbai generously waved her hand, full of heroic spirit. Chapter 213. Miss, what did you say? Master Ah Wu's heart skipped a beat. Hearing his miss speak such lofty words in the middle of the night, he could not help but tremble. Wait a minute. Master Ah Wu was about to open his mouth to persuade Wu Yunbai, but his eyes suddenly widened as he stood rooted to the ground. He sensed the surging waves of true energy coming from Wu Yunbai's body in astonishment. This wave of energy made even him a little apprehensive. Miss, you broke through? Successfully broke through to 7th grade Battle Saint? At this moment, Master Ah Wu was no longer sleepy. He was extremely energetic, and the light that burst out of his eyes was as bright as the stars. Beside him, Serpent Man Ani's heart also skipped a beat. What? The cross-dressing woman before him broke through to 7th grade Battle Saint? She was still so young. Wu Yunbai did not look old, only in her 20s, but her cultivation level had already surpassed many of her peers. As expected of the mysterious power of the illusory spirit swamp, the people of the White Cloud Villa. Perhaps they really had a chance to save Yu Fu and Uncle Yu Feng. Ani's heart, which did not hold much hope, suddenly trembled with hope. The corners of Wu Yunbai's mouth curled up. She could not help but smile as she nodded her head. She activated the true energy within her body. Suddenly, a surging aura and pressure emerged from her body, directly forcing the Serpent Man Ani to take several steps back. You really are a 7th grade Battle Saint. That's great. If the Villa Master knew that you broke through, he would be so happy. Master Ah Wu was so excited that he almost danced with joy. Owner Bu's Frost Blaze Path Understanding Brew is indeed good stuff. Not only was the essence of the Ice Soul Monarch Lotus infused into the wine, it was also infused with many precious spirit herbs. That burning sensation was definitely a spirit herb no weaker than the 7th grade Ice Soul Monarch Lotus. There is a reason why a cup of wine is sold for 500 crystals. Wu Yunbai exclaimed. A cup of wine in exchange for the opportunity to break through from Battle Emperor to Battle Saint, was it worth it? It was absolutely worth it. Let's go, Grandmaster Ah Wu. Let's go and rescue the Serpent Men now. Since we've promised them, we have to keep our promise. This dark and windy night is perfect for us to act. I can also take this opportunity to experience the power of a 7th grade Battle Saint. Wu Yunbai couldn't wait to laugh heartily. Master Ah Wu's expression stiffened. To be honest, he was against getting involved in this matter. Even a 7th grade Battle Saint would be in grave danger in the current Imperial City. His objective was to ensure Wu Yunbai's safety. Naturally, he did not wish to participate in such a dangerous affair. However, looking at the determined look on Wu Yunbai's face, he felt a little helpless. He could only follow Wu Yunbai to change into her night suit and prepare to depart. The moon was dark and the wind was strong. The cold wind blew gently, rolling up the light sand on the ground. A figure wrapped in black clothes revealed his bright and clean head. There were several ring scars on his head as he walked on the wall. His speed was extremely fast and almost didn't make any sound. With a somersault, the bald figure landed at the entrance of the alleyway with a gust of wind. Raising his head, the baldy revealed a pair of bright eyes that contained a tinge of greed. He stuck his head out from behind the wall of the alleyway and looked toward the entrance of Fong Fong's little store. There was a plump black dog lying on the ground, snoring loudly. Such a fat dog, it's rare to see such a rare sight in this world. On a dark and windy night for dog slaughter, I'll be able to have a feast tonight. A suppressed chuckle escaped from his mouth. He remembered that the old fox Zhao Mushing once told him that there was a terrifying spirit beast in the store. However, he did not know what kind of spirit beast it was. However, he knew that he had to be careful during his dog-catching operation. After all, being noticed by a spirit beast that even Zhao Mushing was wary of was simply a dog of AB*TCH. This humble monk is only here to catch a watchdog. That spirit beast shouldn't care too much. Once I catch the dog, I'll immediately run and not look back. It should be fine. The bald man had a perfect plan in his mind. As he thought about the plump black dog, the delicious dog meat he had cooked in the past involuntarily appeared in his mind. Dog meat in a dried pot, dog meat in red braised sauce, dog meat in honey sauce. The more he thought about it, the more impatient he became. This humble monk is known as the dog meat terminator. Big black dog, I'm coming. The baldy let out a soft chuckle as he abruptly tapped the ground with the tip of his foot. Surprisingly, he did not make the slightest sound. He was extremely careful, as he did not dare to cause too much of a commotion in case the powerful spirit beast guarding the store noticed him. Da-da-da. The bald man's body was as light as a swallow. As he tapped the ground with the tip of his foot, his entire body was actually speeding toward the store at an extremely fast speed. His gaze was fixated on the black dog lying on the ground. That plump black dog was covered in meat. Very good. I don't feel any pressure from a spirit beast. It seems like that powerful spirit beast isn't paying attention to me. The bald man secretly heaved a sigh of relief. He had been tensed up the entire time, afraid that the spirit beast would lock onto him. The black dog was still lying on the ground with its nose slightly twitching. It was sleeping soundly and did not show any signs of waking up. The bald man softly clicked his tongue in admiration as he stared at the dog in amazement. He waved his hand in the air and instantly, a dagger emitting an ice-cold glint appeared in his hand. The glow of the dagger was emitting a terrifying radiance in the dark night. Such a fat dog, it would definitely be delicious if I made it into a dried pot of dog meat. The bald man could not help but lick his lip. His eyes narrowed as he fiercely stabbed the dagger toward the big black dog. If he wanted to quietly take away this black dog, he had to be fast, accurate, and ruthless. With a single stab, he would bleed the dog so that it would die before it could even make a sound. He was very familiar with this sort of thing. The place where he stabbed the dagger was the best place to bleed the dog after much research. An ear-piercing sound that made one's hair stand on end and gave them goosebumps rang out. The sound was so crisp and clear in the quiet alleyway. The bald man was stunned as he stared at the dagger in disbelief. The dagger had stabbed into the body of the black dog. Not only did it not pierce through the dog's skin and bleed the fat dog, but it instead piled up like a piece of paper. It was as if he had used too much force to stab into a piece of iron and stone. How is this possible? The bald man's eyes narrowed as he put away the broken dagger in his hand. Instead, he took out another dagger that emitted a cold glint and stabbed it toward the black dog. I stab. I stab. I stab again. Stab your sister. The baldy sat on the ground and looked at the dagger that had been stabbed 3 times and was only left with the handle. A bad premonition suddenly emerged in his heart. He looked at the big black dog that was lying on the ground. The black dog opened its drowsy eyes and slowly turned its head. Its mouth twitched as it looked at the bald man like a human. The bald man's eyes widened, and the big black dog's eyes widened. Damned bald donkey, why did you come here in the middle of the night to tickle the Lord Go? Is it fun? A gentle male voice rang out. It was calm and heartwarming. However, this voice was like a sudden clap of thunder. In an instant, the baldy was so frightened that his entire body started to tremble. His legs kicked the ground as he retreated far away. His face was as if he had seen a ghost as he stared at the big black dog that was looking at him like a human. This fat dog could speak the human language? Blackie rolled its eyes. Even though it did not know why the bald donkey would come to the alleyway in the middle of the night and stab it with a dagger, and even though the dagger did not hurt, it still disturbed the Lord Go's sleep. This was unforgivable. While the baldy was dumbstruck, Black's body, which had been lying on the ground, suddenly stood up. Then, the baldy's eyes almost popped out of their sockets as he stared at the plump dog walking toward him with cat-like steps. On the second floor of the store, Bufang was sleeping soundly. He was completely unaware of what had happened in the alleyway. Even if he knew, he would only twitch the corners of his mouth. Coming to provoke Blackie in the middle of the night. This bald donkey really had nothing better to do. At the same time, at the entrance of a luxurious courtyard in the imperial city, 3 figures dressed in nocturnal clothes stood proudly. "This is the courtyard?" Wu Yunbai could not help but ask as she narrowed her eyes and looked at the luxurious courtyard. The serpent man on eye nodded. He remembered this place very clearly. Yu Fu and Uncle Yu Feng were both imprisoned here. "Young miss, this mansion is not ordinary. Are we really going in?" Master Ah Wu frowned as he looked at the mansion. He felt a terrifying fluctuation coming from it. It was like a dark and bottomless pit that could devour everything. "What are you afraid of?" "Master Ah Wu, don't forget, I am now a 7th grade battle saint. I can already use the semi-divine tool, the cloud-rising sword." Wu Yunbai's eyes shone brightly as she spoke confidently. Master Ah Wu was taken aback for a moment, then felt relieved. The young miss was a woman with a semi-divine tool. Now that she had broken through to 7th grade battle saint, ordinary battle saints were no match for the young miss. Perhaps he really was overthinking things. "Let's go to save them," Wu Yunbai said solemnly. Even though they had a trump card, they still had to be cautious. After all, they were in the imperial city and the storm gathering. The 3 of them moved their true energy slightly and in the blink of an eye, they sped toward the luxurious mansion. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.